So I've just hit the recording button, and yes, it is recording. So it will be available for the public record. And we still have a few minutes before 5:30, so I will rest for a little bit, and if anyone would like to ask any questions, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we'll wait until 5:30 and we'll get started on the presentation proper. Thank you. This is Tyson Vaughn again from the Corps of Engineers. We'll get started in a few minutes. I gave a little introduction to WebEx. One thing that I did forget to mention is for your questions that you may have for us today, if you want to put that in the chat, that's great. Another thing that you can do, particularly when we get to the Q&A portion at the end of the workshop, is if you open up your participants list, and again, that's a button on the lower right, that'll open up a list in the upper right of your screen, and you should see your name at the top. And if you put your mouse over your own name, you will see a little hand just to the right of your name. And if you click on that hand, it'll raise your hand virtually, and it'll bring you to the attention of myself and the other hosts. So we will know that you have a question and you'd like to be called on. So just FYI. I see a lot of folks joining now. This is great. So again, we'll just get started in about 2 minutes. And if you're just joining us, please go ahead and put a mark on the screen in the box that you belong in, if you like to do that. And also chat in your name and if you're with an organization, the name of your organization, and also feel free to let us know why you're interested in this study and this workshop today. Thanks. I love that somebody marked new stakeholder. If you haven't already, please let us know who you are in the chat and what your interest is. That'd be great. Okay, now I'm gonna move the slides. I'm gonna move to the next slide, which is the title slide. All right. So if you're just joining us, welcome again. This is the first public planning workshop for the new Ala Wai Flood Risk Management General Reevaluation Study. My name is Tyson Vaughn. I'm a sociologist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Excuse me. I'll be the MC for today's workshop. So let me start by addressing two questions that many of you are probably wondering. First, what is this new study? And how does it relate to previous Ala Wai studies? And second, stakeholders have already provided tons of input to previous versions of this study. So what happened to that input? And why are we having another round of public meetings? You'll hear more about this as we go, but for now, I'll just say that we, and by we, I mean everyone on this call and everyone with a stake in the Ala Wai watershed. We have been given an opportunity to take a completely fresh look at how to reduce the impacts of flooding with fewer restrictions than previous studies had. So we're looking at a clean sheet of paper. And as such, we're going to consider totally new ideas as well as reconsider ideas that maybe were eliminated in previous analyses. So we're open to fresh perspectives. We don't want old habits of thought to bias our analysis at the start of this new study. But at the same time, we will be able to incorporate a lot of the useful data and the public input from previous studies. So we have not forgotten the ideas that stakeholders have provided before. You know, we've got them on file. We're going to take a fresh look at them. But also, since we are launching a new study, this general reevaluation study process, we want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to contribute as much and as early as possible to that process. So that's why we are here today. So our workshop goals for today, number one, establish a fresh and constructive approach to this current study. Number two, inform our stakeholders about the process, including further opportunities for input beyond today. And number three, and really most importantly, it's to involve our stakeholders in this first iteration of the planning process for this study. So to get input from all of you today. And just a glimpse at our agenda so you know what we're going to be doing for the next 2.5 to 3 hours. There's a lot that we want to accomplish today. We're grateful to have all of you, our partners and our stakeholders, working with us. So for at least the next 2.5 to 3 hours, if you are on this call, consider yourself a part of our extended planning team. So first, the commander of Honolulu District and the mayor of Honolulu will give some opening remarks. Then project manager Cindy Akpal and study lead Eric Merriam will explain why we're here in more detail than I have, and give us an overview of our study process. Then we will have 2 breakout exercises that we'll do in groups, small groups, using our mapping tool, Crowdsource Reporter. And then finally, we will have a Q&A session to answer any remaining questions. We have scheduled 2.5 hours for this workshop. We'll do our best not to take too much of your time, but we also don't want to cut any corners. So the study team is prepared to stay on for 3 hours if needed. And now we're privileged to hear some brief opening remarks from Lieutenant Colonel Eric Marshall, commander of the Corps' Honolulu District, and Mr. Rick Blangiardi, the mayor of Honolulu. There's a lot that I could say about both of these gentlemen. In the interest of time, I'll just mention a couple of quick highlights of the commander's career. He managed critically important projects in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. He served in Afghanistan and was awarded a Bronze Star Medal. He has a master's in nuclear engineering from MIT and was a professor of physics at West Point, so he's smarter than he looks. But seriously, he brings both broad experience and deep expertise to his role as commander, which will serve him well as he oversees this important study. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tyson. Appreciate that. Aloha and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is really a privilege for me to open this community workshop on the Ala Wai flood risk management project. Sharing the podium with none other than our Mayor Blangiardi, is no small thing for me, and honestly, it has me kind of nervous. So to calm my nerves and to add a little levity to this discussion, please permit me to tell a quick story about myself, and I hope you'll find some humor in it. In fact, Tyson kind of alluded to my previous experience with the New Orleans District of the Corps of Engineers. Actually, that was 14 years ago. I was a young captain, newly assigned there right after Hurricane Katrina. Was at the epicenter of a national controversy following that storm. I was assigned as a project manager on what was called the Hurricane Protection System at the time, and that's this massive series of levees and flood walls and pump stations and floodgates, some of which actually did fail during Hurricane Katrina's flood event. Now, a good friend of mine named Ben lived in the 9th Ward, excuse me, of New Orleans. And if you're familiar with the area, or maybe remember some of the stories, the 9th Ward is a lower income neighborhood that saw some of the worst flooding. You may remember seeing footage of just ravaged, wide open plains of neighborhood blocks that were completely wiped out by the waters that flowed through, uplifting homes straight off of their foundations or otherwise destroying the homes. And that's where my friend chose to live. And he wanted to rebuild his own home there, and he started a community development corporation, a CDC, to try to stimulate some economic growth. He said it would really help his neighbors if I could offer some assurance that the Corps will repair and improve the system. So now by this time, I had deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, done nation building and things of that nature. And so, I was full of ideals about democracy, and I might have been just a wee bit overconfident in my abilities and what I thought I knew about things. So I gladly accepted the offer. When I consulted with the expert on that part of the hurricane protection system, I'll never forget how he kind of chuckled at me and said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And he was still laughing, shaking his head as I walked away out of his office. I'll also never forget the name of the street where the community center was, where we met, was called Desire Street. Just a name that kind of sticks in my head. And the place was packed. My friend Ben, he was elated because he drew a crowd. And but I can tell you that all the residents that showed up, they didn't have the same positive demeanor that my friend did. there was a real pregnant silence as I was introduced and walked up to the podium. So I assume if with a crowd this large, I'm really, really excited to see how many people have showed up for this, but a crowd this large, somebody out there has watched Parks and Recreation. All right, I hope I can't see heads nodding or anything, but in Parks and Recreation, there's an iconic first episode of the first season where Leslie Knope, you might remember, Leslie Knope, Pinky promised her friend Anne that she was going to repair the big hole in front of her house and build a park on it. Well, in that episode, Leslie Knope kind of turns to the camera and says, you know, all of these people, well, in that community meeting, there's a lot of, she was getting a real hard time from the community members there about the hole and other things. And she, at some point, turned to the camera and said, you know, all of these people, I see them as caring community members. And when they start yelling obscenities at me, all I hear is really loud caring. Well, I can tell you that that community meeting that I was at was much worse than anything in Pawnee County. And I heard a lot of very loud caring. I was eviscerated before my first paragraph was finished in that meeting. Anyway, one point of the story, though, is that I learned that what we in USACE call civil works is more than an engineering solution involving math and concrete. And I do think that that's what I thought it was at the time. Oh, this is a problem we can solve with good engineering. But in reality, it's very impactful on people's lives, sometimes even life and death. You know, flood risk management is a process of real engagement. It's communicating, it's listening, and it's building trust. Long before we can build anything at all, that's what we have to do, is we have to build trust. So the second point of that story, though, is I was hooked. Now, not by that experience, because that experience was actually pretty horrible. I felt like Wile E. Coyote, and my friend Ben was like the road runner. But the possibility of leading a major civil works project sometime in the future was incepted in me, and I was automatically hooked. I wanted to come back and do this type of work again. So before taking over the Honolulu district, which was in June of 2020, I was already excited about the Ala Wai project. I had heard about it and studied up a little bit. It was a big flood risk management project, a system of interdependent features, reducing the risks to life and property in a metropolitan area and surrounding communities. The Manoa, Palolo, McCully, and Mo'ili-Lili neighborhoods. One almost has to laugh, though, at the fact that in the first year of my tenure, the Ala Wai project, in its existing form at the time, it exceeded budgetary limits. And the mayor, one of my first times having to meet Mayor Blangiardi, I had to brief him on this. It was not an easy brief to give. And so the project, well, it died. And once again, the image of Wile E. Coyote holding an anvil as he falls off a cliff kind of comes to mind. But admittedly, my understanding of the history of the project had to catch up with yours. I know many of you are aware that the Ala Wai project began almost 20 years ago with visions of a much different end state than what resulted about last summer. We first tried to detain stormwaters in the upper reaches of the valleys. And through further analysis, we found that that could not be accomplished due to technical and real estate reasons. We then resorted to conveying the stormwaters as fast as possible. Since we couldn't detain the water, we tried to convey the water as fast as possible through the valleys down to the Ala Wai. And then we had to to do that, we had to put a very large pump station right in the middle of Waikiki to push that water out to the Makai. So cost of these features, and this is important, the risks of those costs going up exceeded all budgetary thresholds that we had. And so the project ceased to exist in that form. But the Ala Wai project now has a chance of redemption. We're taking a new approach, as Tyson mentioned, through a fresh set of eyes. See, throughout the past 20 years of modeling, designing, and public meetings, USACE in the city and county of Honolulu were constrained to focus on the 100-year storm. So the 100-year storm, that's a storm with water flows so big it only has a 1% chance of occurring each year. Now, that's a storm that actually the Watershed has never seen before. And to build a structure to withstand those type of water elevation requires very large, very invasive structures. And we know from modeling and even my own experience in the past year that a 2-year storm has enough intensity to overtop the banks and put water in the streets. So it made us think there must be a solution, possibly with some federal interest, at a much lower what we call exceedance rate, or much more probability, greater probability of storm. So under this new study, we have federal authority to design for a level of protection other than the 1% storm. In fact, we aim to find the optimal level of protection that maximizes benefits to the community. So that is an altogether different approach. Furthermore, we have the opportunity to explore natural and nature-based solutions. So much of what we've heard from the community in previous engagements is that you want us to look at these type of natural features. The beauty of this new study is that we can leverage all of the previous input that you provided in the past, as well as all that math and modeling that we did as well, and reevaluate it with fresh eyes. So lastly, we are committed, and I'd say we always were, but now we have renewed commitment to real engagement. So that's communicating and listening and building trust with each of you. And I think that you'll find that the way this workshop is being played out tonight will satisfy that. You'll see a difference in the way this is done. Even though it's virtual, I think you'll see there's a lot more interaction. So all of this will be accomplished tonight, and I'm very thankful for your civic participation. We absolutely need it, and for the excellent partnership shown by Mayor Blangiardi's administration. I'll remain online for the duration of this workshop to field any questions, but my project team is on, and they're the experts. Mahalo for your time.
Thank you so much, sir, for laying that out so clearly for us. Really appreciate it, and that's a great story as well. Now, on this evening before Veterans Day, I want to thank Mayor Rick Blangiardi for his service as a veteran of the Naval Reserve. Mayor Blangiardi is well known for his distinguished career as a media executive. He has received a truly impressive list of awards, not only for professional excellence, but also for community service. And he both played and coached football at the University of Hawaii. So he too brings a unique set of skills to bear as a leader for this initiative. Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours, sir.
Tyson, thank you. I mean, I don't get one of those, I look smarter than I really am kind of deal. It's okay. First of all, let me just build on Colonel Marshall's comments and just thank everybody for being on this call tonight. And we're here, and we will be here also for the duration of the call. We're very interested in engaging. And so I would tell you that first and foremost, I am very grateful that we're getting another opportunity at this project. As Colonel Marshall alluded, we first met actually in December before we were even sworn into office to learn that the project was not going to make it and that it was sort of dead in the water, if you will. And so I want to really acknowledge Colonel Marshall and the Army Corps of Engineers for their understanding of how critically important this is to the future of our island and giving us an opportunity and what we've been able to work through and to develop a feasibility study. And once again, to learn from things that were done before, good or bad, take that into it and develop a different plan going forward, as you heard him say. So Colonel Marshall, I'm very grateful. And it should be me. My time in the Navy was a long time ago on the eve of Veterans Day, acknowledging you, sir, and your team, and thanking all of you for your incredible service to our country. And this is just a great example of it. On a personal note, and I'm going to be brief because I do want to introduce Alex Kozlov, who's our Director of Design and Construction, who's going to be a really central point guy. And I'd like you to hear his voice and hear from him. But I would tell you, though, administratively, we do really have a strong belief in the issues that we're up against with respect to climate change and what the probabilities are of a 100-year storm or otherwise. We know we're dealing with rising sea level challenges. We know we have a lot to protect in the Ala Wai watershed. We know that right now that doesn't exist. And we know fundamentally we need to do something about that, for the long-term sake. And hopefully time will be on our side, which is a great concern. So in that regard, the word trust has been brought up a few times. We're here to tell you that that's what we exactly want to do. We want to engage the community. We want to build trust. We want to be transparent. We want to seek your input. I think you're going to really like the way this is designed so that we can really, be able to evaluate and validate what you have to say. So I'm excited to get this underway. Again, a debt of gratitude to the Army Corps of Engineers for not giving up on us, for wanting to come back in. I was really fearful, given my feelings and belief of this project, that when we were told in December it wasn't going to happen, that we'd have to stand in line for a long time, maybe 10 years or so, and I don't think our island can afford that. So that said, I would like to introduce Alex Kozlov, who is our Director again of Design and Construction. This man has built projects all over the world. We have incredible confidence in Alex. We're very grateful that he came to join our team. It's been a great first 10 months with him. So Alex, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening and aloha, everybody. My name is Alex Kozlov, and I'm sitting here listening to Colonel Marshall and the Mayor and the team from the Corps of Engineers and just continue to be excited, very excited about where we are today. Even though this is just really step one of many, many steps, where it's step one of this reevaluation study, this is an exciting thing that we're trying to do simply because of the big aperture that we have in being able to not have a predetermined conclusion or predetermined idea of where we want to go. Everything is on the table. Everything is open. Everything is worthy of discussion from this point on. And we want your constructive ideas, constructive being the operative word. There'll be opportunities today during today's session to provide some ideas, but that's not the main time. This crowdsourced reporting tool that you'll be introduced to today, the one thing I would suggest that you walk away with is that you'll learn how to use it. Learn how to use this tool because this will be up for the next 30 days. And if you don't get your say in today, you've got 30 days to be able to put into this crowdsourced reporting whatever it is that's on your mind. And from my point of view, and it's my responsibility to do this, is to make sure that everything gets read. And that's huge. 30 days worth of ideas. And we need those. We need your constructive thoughts. The more people and the more things that we think about and talk about, the closer we are to hone into this ideal idea, this optimum level of protection that we don't know today what it's going to look like, but we'll know very quickly what we think this is going to be quickly in terms of months and years, not days or weeks. So learn how to use this crowdsourced reporting tool and submit your constructive ideas over the next 30 days. And I'm looking forward to reading those ideas and responding to them via the website, which is going to be our major way to communicate going forward. I'd like to end there's over 100 participants tonight, and I know that there's at least some veterans out there that are listening to this. I'd like to thank you for your service, one veteran to another. Thank you for your service, and the gratitude of me personally and our nation goes out to you in advance of Veterans Day. So thanks, and let's get this show on the road.
Thanks so much, Alex and Mr. May. I really appreciate those remarks. We'll take those words to heart. So I will actually paste my email address into the chat so that you all have it. So if anybody has any issues, you can send me an email. Now, all successful workshops have ground rules, whether they're made explicit or not. So here are our ground rules for today. First, please do participate, especially during the exercises and the Q&A, which we have coming up pretty soon. Your input is the raison d'etre of this workshop. So we need that. Second, let's work together as a team. As I mentioned for this call, we consider everybody on this call a member of our extended planning team. So let's work together constructively and collaboratively. Let's stay open to fresh perspectives. Number 3, again, this is we're taking a fresh look at this. Number 4, if you have comments and questions, please post them in the chat, or you can hold them until the Q&A if you like, and keep your audio on mute unless you're speaking. So most of these are fairly straightforward. I'll get to the other ones later when we get to the parts of the workshop that are more these are more germane to. But in the interest of time, I'd like to give the floor next to our study project manager, Cindy Akpal. She'll introduce things to you. Over to you, Cindy.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Cindy Akpal. I am a project manager with the Army Corps of Engineers. And presenting alongside with me will be Eric Merriam, the lead planner for this general evaluation study. And our lead facilitator for this meeting, who you've already met, is Tyson Vaughn of the Collaboration and Public Participation Center of Expertise. Also, we have several project team members on the line from both the Army Corps of Engineers and the City and County of Honolulu. From the Army Corps of Engineers, we have Kelly Philbin, Elliot Porter, Jeff Herzog, Vera Costello, and Minerva Anderson. And from the City and County of Honolulu, we have Mike Formby, Alex Kozlov, Haku Miles, Matt Gonzer, and Tim Sakahara. The members listed as facilitators will be helping to facilitate the breakout rooms, and both facilitators and discussants will help to answer any questions you may have during the Q&A session at the end. Next slide, please. This slide here focuses on why are we here and what are the known risks. The Ala Wai watershed, which is the focus of our study, encompasses the Makiki, Manoa, and Palolo streams, which all drain into the Ala Wai Canal. The canal is a man-made feature constructed in the 1920s to drain the wetlands. Its original design was not intended to be a flood control measure. Overtopping of the canal has previously flooded Waikiki and its surrounding Maukasai neighborhoods multiple times, including the November 1965 and December 1967 storms, and during the passage of Hurricane Iniki in 1992. The upstream areas are also at risk of flooding, as demonstrated in the October 2004 and March 2006 storms. The 2004 Manoa flood was estimated to be somewhere between a 25 and 50-year storm and caused $86 million in damages at the University of Hawaii. In 2006, there was a 40 days and 40 nights of rain that wasn't associated with any specific size storm event, but caused widespread flooding throughout the watershed. These flood risks have the possibility to substantially impact the approximately 200,000 residents living and working in the watershed. Some of these residents living in the floodplain would be directly impacted. Others who work or go to school or are just visiting temporarily may be indirectly impacted. Here we look at the life safety risk, not only from the direct flooding impacts, but also from an indirect perspective, such as access to emergency shelters, the ability for first responders to get to you in a timely manner, or with the closure of any major thoroughfare, such as the ones we've seen several times on the H1 at Liliha due to flooding. In addition to life safety risks, there's also the economic importance of the watershed, not only for the tourism in Waikiki, but also for the multiple mom and pop stores, all the businesses throughout the watershed, up at Manoa Marketplace, over in Paxali, in Makali, Mo'iliili. Statistics show that this watershed, pre-COVID times, generates 8% of the gross state product, valuing approximately $5 billion. It accounts for 11% of civilian jobs in the state, 42% of the state's visitor industry revenue, 12% of the state and county tax revenue. From an economic perspective, this is one of the most important watersheds in the state of Hawaii. Finally, there are also a number of critical facilities such as hospitals, fire stations, police stations, schools, and emergency shelters. Given the urban density of this watershed, there is a relatively high volume of what is considered to be critical infrastructure in this area, much of which is located within the potential floodplain. This reduces the ability for quick recovery from any potential flood events. The map down over here shows the maximum possible extent of a 1% annual exceedance probability, also known as a 100-year storm event, as identified by the current modeling. This simply shows the extent or the footprint of the potentially impacted area within this watershed. Next slide, please. Now, this isn't the first time that flood risk in this watershed has been studied. This project's been around since 1999, but here's some recent history. The feasibility study of 2017 resulted in project authorization in 2018. Once we moved into the design phase, we now had the funding and opportunity to update some of the technical analyses, such as the hydrology and hydraulics, with the most up-to-date technology. At that point, it became evident that modifications were going to be needed in order for the recommended system to function at the same level of performance as that which was authorized, specific to that 1% annual exceedance probability or 100-year storm. These technical updates were captured in the 2020 engineering documentation report. Through the validation study earlier this year, we conducted further analysis of the costs, economics, and environmental impacts. Ultimately, it was determined that the modifications proposed in the engineering documentation report just simply could not be economically justified. And rather than completely terminating the study and understanding the need and the risks that this watershed has, the Army Corps of Engineers opened a general reevaluation study, which allows us to take a fresh look without the same constraints imposed by the previous study. And this leads us to where we are today, in the beginning stages of our general reevaluation study. We now have the opportunity to find a cost-effective project that maximizes benefits to the community and the economy. Your continued participation and just mere presence here tonight will help this study and our project team gather the critical information we need to make this study a success. Thank you. Next slide.
Great, thanks, Cindy. So what are the objectives of the general reevaluation study that Cindy just mentioned? Understanding that we're still early in the study process, we've identified three main study objectives to date. The first is to reduce risk to life and safety. The second is to reduce economic damages to structures and infrastructure, as Cindy just mentioned on the previous slides. And then the third is to reduce economic impacts to commerce and tourism. One thing worth noting here is that all of these objectives relate directly back to riverine flooding. So this study was funded as a flood risk management study, and flood risk management as defined by the Army Corps of Engineers relates to riverine flooding. However, it's well known that riverine flooding is affected by other coastal and tidal influences, and so this study will also consider those aspects to the extent that they impact riverine flooding. Next slide, please. So it's important to keep those study objectives in your mind because the ultimate goal of this study is to identify a plan that meets those study objectives. And so I really want to spend some time now to kind of go through the Army Corps of Engineers planning process that will help us to identify a plan and hopefully recommend a plan at the end of the study. So I have a series of steps here, and I'll just go through them fairly quickly. So the first phase in an Army Corps planning study is to identify the problems and opportunities. And this is really where we're seeking your engagement this evening. So we're holding public engagement meetings to have the community help us identify the problems that they are seeing and the opportunities as they see them. And we're also reviewing all the existing information that we've developed in previous iterations of the study, as Cindy just mentioned. And then finally, we'll be conducting site visits throughout the watershed and leveraging knowledge from those folks and stakeholders, as well as I saw a comment in the chat a few minutes ago about, the feedback received during previous iterations of the study, be part of this study. Absolutely, we are taking all feedback, that we received during previous iterations and incorporating that into this study as well. So the second phase is the inventory and forecast conditions, and this is really where we leverage the technical tools that we developed as the Army Corps. So we'll build hydrologic and hydraulic models to better characterize flood risks, things like flood inundation, flood extents. We'll also develop economic models to kind of translate those flood characteristics into economic damages, as well as life safety concerns. We can quantify life safety impacts as well. We're also going to be inventorying and forecasting environmental conditions. I know environmental interests are extremely important in this watershed and the various stakeholders, and so absolutely going to characterize the environmental conditions and consider how any plan that we implement will affect the environment. And it's important to note too that we look at all these things under both current and future conditions, understanding that changes in socio-economic or socio-demographic characteristics may change, as well as things like climate change and sea level rise. So the third step is to develop alternative plans, and this is really where we identify a series of management measures. And when I say management measure, I'm really just talking about features that we can implement in the watershed to reduce flood risk and meet those objectives. So we identify a series of management measures and then combine them into what we call a series of basin-wide alternatives. And ultimately, once we have those alternatives, we'll compare and evaluate them to one another, and then ultimately select a plan. And we'll do that based off of the economic assessments, the life safety risks, the environmental assessments, and the potential environmental impacts or benefits that may happen as the result of those plans. It's really important to note here that public input is critical to the overall study process. And so here tonight, again, we're going to be really kind of hitting hard on the identifying problems and opportunities, but we're also going to be seeking your input into the initial stages of developing alternative plans by asking you to help us identify areas where you believe measures might be appropriate throughout the watershed. So next slide, please. So we did want to briefly talk about the overall study process and timeline and how stakeholders and the public can engage throughout the process. I understand this is a busy slide, but if you kind of focus on the big blue arrows at the top, the previous slide kind of took us through study scoping and alternatives, evaluation, and analysis. So you can see that we're here early in the study scoping phase where we're really developing those problems and opportunities. And again, we're seeking your input this evening. The next phase for public engagement will be after we've begun screening out various management measures or features, and we're starting to develop where we have a focused array of those alternatives. So again, we've screened measures and we have a focused array of those alternative plans. We'll seek your input and we'll provide you information on why measures were screened and how they were screened, and how they are combined into a series of alternatives. And we'll engage you to ask for your feedback to see if there's anything that we're missing, potential secondary impact that we might have not thought from those alternatives that we've developed. We'll then, finalize the draft report after we've selected a plan and release that draft report for public comment. And this will be your third opportunity for formal public meetings like this. We'll have a public meeting to go over the tentatively selected plan that we've identified and obtain your feedback on that plan. And then ultimately, once the tentatively selected plan has been approved by the Army Corps of Engineers, we'll do some additional analysis. We'll refine that plan and finally make a recommendation with a final report. And again, prior to the release of the final report, we'll come back to the public and we'll provide you information on what the final recommendation looks like, again, seeking your input at that point. And so that's kind of the overall process for the study and the various periods for public engagement. But I do want to note that I've only kind of gone over the 4 formal public engagement series of meetings that we're going to have. The study team will absolutely address comments and questions through various forums, including emails and website, and additional meetings as necessary throughout the study process. So don't think that these 4 meetings are the only opportunities. And so I guess next slide, please. So why are we here tonight? So really, let's start kind of getting into that study scoping process and the information that we're really trying to receive from you this evening, because we don't want to talk at you all night. We want to be in receiving mode as well. So the first thing we're going to ask you to do is help us identify the problems in the watershed, as they relate to flood risks. So what is the definition of a problem? Essentially, it's an undesirable condition that we can address through this study, right? And when we ask you to help us identify the problems this evening, Alex mentioned the crowdsourced reporter earlier that we're going to use. Really, we can talk about the nature of the flooding, the exact location. If you live in a house that has flooded historically, tell us about how, what was the depth of flooding? When did it occur? That's the type of detailed information that the study team can leverage as we start getting into the study process. Just 2 general types of problems that we generally identify for flood risk management studies. Elevated life safety risks, and so as Cindy mentioned earlier, these can be direct risks to inundation for homes in the floodplain, limited warning and evacuation times due to kind of the flashy nature of the watershed and the flooding, exposure to contaminated floodwaters, and so forth, right? So risks to life and safety. We can also talk about problems associated with economic damages. So again, direct damages to homes and businesses in the floodplain, as well as disruption of commerce and tourism, as I mentioned earlier. So again, I'm going to ask you to really kind of get into that tool and help us specifically identify areas and problem areas that you've experienced in the past. So next slide, please. So along with problems, we're going to ask you to help us identify opportunities. And so these are desirable future conditions that could be realized. And so when we talk about potential environmental benefits, these environmental benefits really do represent potential opportunities, right? And so improved ecological conditions, reduced economic impacts, reduced life safety risks, potential benefits to recreational opportunities and things like that. Again, if you have specific locations for areas where we can realize these types of opportunities, that would be fantastic. And so we're seeking that input this evening. So next slide, please. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, kind of after we during the study scoping phase, we identify problems and opportunities. In the next phase, we're going to start developing alternatives, and so we're going to ask you to help us with that phase of the study as well this evening. We're going to ask you to help us identify features or actions that we can take at specific locations throughout the watershed to address those problems and realize those opportunities that you helped us identify earlier, or that you will help us identify previously. And so when we talk about building a solution, there are different types of features that we can implement, right? So there are natural and nature-based measures, And so these can be things like restoring natural floodplains and natural terraces, restoring natural channel geometry and flow, native plantings. I understand, non-native plants throughout the watershed might not have roots that go as deep, so they might uproot easier, causing debris. And if we can, plant trees or plants that have deeper roots, it prevents erosion and debris building up in the stream. So that's a natural nature-based measure that we can implement. And also things like green infrastructure, so implementing rain gardens, forest pavement, and things like that throughout the watershed as well. It's important to note here that these are only examples. Again, some of these examples were raised during previous iterations of the study and the public feedback, but these are just examples, right? And we want your help this evening to expand this list, right? So we want an expanded list of potential natural and nature-based measures that we can implement throughout the watershed. Next slide, please. So in addition to natural and nature-based measures, we also have non-structural features. And so non-structural features are features that can reduce or avoid flood damages essentially by changing the use of the floodplain or accommodating the uses kind of to the flood hazard. So a great example is structure elevation. You can raise or elevate a home. And so there's a picture of that on the right. Wet and dry floodproofing is another non-structural measure where you essentially dry floodproofing is preventing the floodwaters from entering a home or a business. And so you can, install floodproof doors, floodproof membranes on walls. Wet floodproofing is essentially where you let the structure flood, and you can do things like internally elevate any equipment. Say in a garage, you can elevate equipment so that it doesn't get damaged. That's an example of wet floodproofing. You can acquire and relocate homes, and also flood warning and general flood preparedness is also a non-structural measure that we can implement. And finally, there are structural features. And so these are things that, these are measures that reduce or avoid flood damage by modifying the flood hazard. And so channel modification, diversion and bypass channels or tunnels that have been discussed in previous iterations of the study. Second channel outlets have been discussed as well, flood walls, detention and storage, and so forth. And so these are structural measures. And again, these are only examples of those types of measures that have been discussed in the past that we could implement. Again, we want your help identifying specific areas on the maps, as well as other measures that I have not included here this evening on this list. Over. Next slide, please. So I'll end there, Tyson, and send it back to you.
All right, appreciate it, Eric. Thank you. So we're now about to start our first breakout exercise in which you'll be doing work with our mapping tool while also discussing this task verbally in your groups. So this is just a reminder for the discussions. Want to just mention again, unless you're speaking, to keep your audio on mute. When you do speak in the conversation, introduce yourself and then say over when you finish a point. Also be conscious of acronyms and technical language, and also be mindful of your colleagues and help ensure that everyone has a chance to speak. So if you can keep your comments and questions to 3 minutes or less, that would be helpful. This is not an ironclad rule, but just in general, if you can help make sure that everybody has a chance to talk, that would be great. With that, okay, so let's get to work. Eric told us about problems and opportunities. Now we're going to go into our breakout groups and use this tool, Crowdsource Reporter, that we mentioned. We're going to mark up a map with notes about problems and opportunities in the watershed. And remember, our focus is on flooding, but if you want to mention other kinds of environmental problems and opportunities that we should take into account, please feel free to do so. The objective of this exercise is mainly to provide information that our technical staff can incorporate into their analyses. So please alert us to new conditions or tell us something that you think we don't know, or maybe that you think we don't fully appreciate. And please confirm or remind us of conditions that you think we already know, especially the most important ones, of course. I will paste this link into the chat in a minute here so that everybody on this call can use the tool independently and start submitting information. while we're doing that in our individual groups, our breakout facilitator will facilitate a verbal discussion as well. But first, let me just quickly show you how to use this tool. I'm going to share my browser. Okay. Okay. So when you click the link that I'm going to paste into the chat in a second, you will first see this. There's a splash screen with some basic instructions. Okay, just you can close that. Just to give you a quick tour, at the upper left here, you can zoom in and zoom out. You can click this to zoom in on your particular location, and then we have some other legend stuff here. Now I'm gonna, as I said, I'll put you into breakout groups. We're gonna do 6 groups, so we're not actually gonna need the 7th. So what you'll do is you first click on the number of the group that you are in. So I just, for an example, I'll click group 7. Okay, so there we have the map again, and you'll see on the upper right here, click to start a comment. So you click that. Okay, put your name here at the top. Select whether you're going to be talking about a problem or an opportunity or a potential solution. We're going to focus on solutions in our second breakout exercise later. So for this one, we'll mostly be doing problems and opportunities. If you'd like to put any of this additional information so that we have it, you can do that. But, be aware that this other information will only be visible to us at the study team. So when people click, okay, so I'm just going to give you an example. So my name is Tyson. Problem. Okay, issue description, whatever that is, and I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to say, that there's an issue here at the Ala Wai Community Park. Okay, so I just put my mark there, and then I'm going to click report it, and there it is. Now, someone else can then click on this point and they can see what I wrote, but they will not see the optional information such as, my email, my phone number, all that stuff. That is not visible. So I want to make sure that that's understood. Okay, let me then move back to our, sorry, stop sharing that. Okay. Okay, great. So I'm going to paste this into the chat. And then, so you can copy that, and then I'm going to send you into your breakout groups, and your facilitator will paste that back in again to make sure that you've got it. We're going to take 30 minutes to do this. That should be enough, I think, for you to learn how to use it so that over the next 30 days, you'll have an opportunity to put more stuff in. Again, you don't have to put everything in today. We know that many of you have provided input to us before. You can just refer us back to that input if you like. But this is just to get us started and get the conversation going. So, okay, so I'm going to send us into our breakouts. And again, it's going to be 30 minutes, and I'll send a warning before we close the breakouts. Okay, here we go. Okay, if you are not in a breakout room, you can click join. You can select one and you can join. If you are a co-host and a facilitator, you can select the one that I've assigned to you. Or you can also stay here in the main room, and Vera Koskela will be facilitating a discussion here in the main room. But I encourage you to choose a breakout session and go in there and get a conversation going and start practicing using this tool. And I'm going to go in room number 6. We just want to see here, did everybody go into their breakout rooms? I'm showing that they're filling up. If you would like to unmute yourself, you can unmute yourself. You can click *6 on your phone or just the unmute button in WebEx. Okay, it looks like it has worked for most people, but again, if you're stuck in the main room, you can join manually there should be a little window at the right of your screen that shows a list of breakout sessions, and you can click join. Or if you like, you can stay here in the main room. I'm going into breakout session 6 because that's where I'm supposed to be facilitating. Vera Koskelo should be here to help you out in this one, but I'll come back and check to make sure that everything's okay. All right.
Hey everybody, so with me here in the main room, do we have anybody left? I see Ellen there, hello. Do you want to join one of the breakout groups? Do you need help? That's a yes? Oh, you don't know? Let's see, I've got more options here. Okay. Well, for those that are still left with me, thank you for hanging tight with me here. So we've got some folks on the phone, and I know that on the phone only, so we don't have the opportunity to do crowdsource reporter right off the bat, and I want to make sure I capture what folks are on the phone are thinking as far as their input before we try and tackle some crowdsource reporter together. So for starters, I'll just go through the folks I still see where it looks like they're phone only. I've got someone labeled Wal Sik Om. I'm going to see if you're able to unmute and share some input with us. Okay, and on deck, we've got somebody who's already unmuted, listed. The last 2 digits of your phone number is 91. So the last 2 digits are 91. Okay. And let's see. Okay, nothing from you guys yet. Let's take a break and go with somebody that I can see, and if I've missed you on the phone, we'll come back to you in just a sec. Ellen, are you able to use the chat, or are you only able to use your voice?
Partway through
okay.
the presentation, it froze up.
Repeat that?
Partway through the presentation, it all froze up.
It froze up. Sometimes that happens when we have our videos on because our poor little computers are just working overtime. So, but no worries, the presentation is on the website. So if you go to, let's see here, I think I've still got it up. If you go to honolulu.gov/Ala Wai, and Ala Wai is all one word, the presentation will be up there. So you'll get to see the rest of the presentation. Yeah. Did you have any comments before we try and connect with some of the other folks on the phone? Any comments specifically about the problems you're seeing relative to flooding? Because we are going to come back and talk solutions in the next round.
They're so echoing. Why is this echoing?
That's a good question. Okay, so is it I'm echoing, or are you hearing your own voice echo?
I'm echoing.
Okay, so it might be relative to how, like, if you have like the speakers on your computer on, and that's where the noise is coming from.
I don't know. I'm in a lot of WebEx meetings, and this never happened before.
I think what happened,
Okay.
Ellen, this is
Well,
Elton. Did you join
okay.
twice? I see there, you're on two screens. One, we see your picture, the other one, we see your name. So that's the source of the feedback.
How do I get rid of the second one?
I think you have to leave one of the meetings. I think you joined twice somehow.
Okay, how do I leave? How do I leave?
So there should be more than one screen up?
Yeah, do you see that, Vera? I see Ellen's name, Ellen Watson, and then I see her picture. So that's a different.
I do. Yeah, I do. I'm going to send a message to that, or I'm going to ask that Ellen to unmute. Okay, now I only see one.
Now I only see one. Ellen, do you hear yourself now?
All right, Ellen, try again.
I think you're muted, Ellen. Are you muted?
Okay, now you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
There's no more.
Are you still getting feedback? So. All right. Thank you, Elton. Great job.
Thank you, Elton.
All right, you're welcome.
So Ellen and Elton, any comments on or thoughts about like problems that should be considered? And remember, we're going to touch on solutions in the next go round, but any thoughts on problems at this point?
Yeah, so I'd just like to talk about my side of the valley. So I'm about a quarter mile below Paradise Park, and I live on the slope, not on the valley floor. And there's quite a lot of water that comes down, mainly from, I would say, roofs and impermeable surfaces. And there just is a huge amount of water during a torrential rainstorm. And the water can be the street outside of my on one side of my house can be like a river with maybe 2 or 3 inches of water just rushing down. And so I think if we could lessen the amount of water through, I think Ellen said, having your gutters, your roof gutters, point those toward your yard, not put them on an impermeable surface like a driveway, so that it won't go into the
Street.
into the storm drain, but rather into the ground. And I've noticed that with my yard, I've got 3 or 4 inches of zoysia grass. It's like a sponge, and very little water actually goes into the storm drain. So if more houses had that kind of a ground cover, I think you could cut a lot of the water that comes from the residential area, which is a large part of the flooding, comes from the residential areas of Manoa, which then go into the storm drainage system. Over.
Thank you, Elton. Thank you for sharing. So I'm hearing your suggestion regarding redirecting rainfall from one's gutters rather than having that outlet at an impervious surface, redirecting to a permeable surface like a yard. Okay, great point about, and you brought up a great point about the problem in particular, that there is heavy rainfall in roadways in some of these residential communities. So that's a great point. We've got some other folks on the phone. You should all be able to unmute yourselves. It looks like I've still got Taylor Date. We've got Pauline, Mike T, Leo, Ken Kaneshiro, Kathleen, Drew Matsumoto, Becky Gardner. So if any of you folks have any of the problem aspect of our discussion to share, this is your time. If you don't really want to talk it through, you're also, I'll paste in the chat and say it out loud, but you can either share your problem comments or questions or suggestions in the chat, or you can send it to Alawai at honolulu.gov. I'm going to send that out to everybody. Okay. So folks on the phone, any more thoughts about problem issues regarding flooding in this watershed? I could see you, Drew. Go for it.
Hi, my name's Drew. I noticed that a lot of the flooding that I've seen, especially after the flood occurs, I noticed a lot of the bridges where the flood waters had come over is filled with debris, mostly trees and branches. If the streams were maintained to get rid of large debris as far as branches and fallen trees, it probably would help alleviate a lot of the flood that occurs next to bridges. But we also have the problem with people throwing other things in the stream, you know, household stuff. So that doesn't help either. But I noticed that a lot of it, at least when I drove by some of the bridges, you could see that it was just packed with fallen trees or branches. So that's you know, I was wondering if there's a way where if more maintenance could be done in the streams, it could alleviate a lot of that from happening. Over.
Thank you, Drew. That's a great point regarding a problem that it's not just the water in the streams, but we're also having a lot of debris, and it sounds like you're talking about some of that woody debris, the albizia trees. Okay, great point. Anybody else? We've got some time. Let's hear from you. We've got Dale Kobayashi on the line. Please feel free to share or to send in your comments via the chat or the Alawai at honolulu.gov email.
Situation for the Ala Wai flood risk management study. I think that should be more of a priority than to build that bridge. So I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you so much for your time.
Surely. It's been a while, but I used to be Mehameha with Uncle Sam, just down the canal from you.
Huh? Sure.
Okay, thanks. We had somebody speaking from the account labeled Steve Holmes, who brought up it sounded like a problem.
I did put your comment in there, and so the
Okay, somebody brought up about prioritization of local projects and sort of considering that as part of the overall problem that there's only so many resources to go around. So that's what I heard. I think somebody spoke after that, but it sounds like maybe we're getting a little crosstalk from some other stuff. So, okay, so thank you for the comment from the account labeled Steve Holmes. Any other folks have specific problem areas where you're seeing flooding or other restrictions in terms of, like, I would love to solve this problem related to the flooding? Any other folks here that would like to share?
Can you see me? Oh, okay.
I cannot, but I can hear you. Are you Leo or Leo?
Yeah. Well, my name is Grant. Leo's my son. So Grant Tokumi is my name. I couldn't figure out how to change the label. But sorry, I came in kind of late. This is just to vocalize problems in our area, or just anything, our concerns in general.
Yeah, so we're doing 2 sessions of kind of breakout groups. This first session is to discuss problems observed relative to, we've seen flooding in this area, other specific, one consideration that was just brought up was about prioritizing how the city funds projects. Another person brought up woody debris in the stream and the potential to exacerbate flooding. Somebody else brought up gutters, sort of what folks can do on their own as far as managing outfall from gutters. So this part is the discussion about problems, and our next session will be about solutions. So either way, feel free to share either on the phone now or in the chat box or via email if you think of something now or later to alawai@honolulu.gov. But over to you, Grant.
Okay. I just wanted to when I look at the news, it's called Ala Wai Canal. It seems like the focus is all at the Ala Wai Canal. And so I just wanted to, I don't know, give my input to make sure that the people within the watershed itself, within, Manoa and the Palolo, that really this whole project is supposed to help the entire watershed from flooding, not just the Ala Wai Canal. And so, yeah, I just, to make sure the resources actually goes to help everybody, not just Waikiki, I guess.
Great point, Grant. Thank you. And I hear that as sort of a problem, making sure that resources are distributed evenly and are supporting all of the residents. And that is definitely a key point that is part of the backbone of this project, making sure that it's primarily based around riverine flooding, and that has to do with the tributaries to the Ala Wai. So yes, noted. Dale, I see you on the video. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, sorry, I hope to come on earlier, but just kind of jumping in now, a little held up. Yeah, as you know, I've been involved from the start and just been really advocating for the Valley communities in particular to come up with a solution that is not so intrusive as what we originally come up with. So I'm glad we're back here getting input from the community. So just more listening in on this. I mean, I have people that are far smarter than me on the engineering aspects of things on what we thought would be a good idea that you'll be hearing from. But yeah, I'm more here to listen.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and as far as how we think we'll solve some of these problems, we're going to circle back to that. And as was addressed in the chat earlier, we know that there's some folks on the line that are experienced stakeholders who have commented during previous iterations of this project, and those comments are still in play and have been collected and will be shared as part of the record. So in the interim, as we're gathering information from this meeting. Some of the items that are brought up as either the problems or some of the solutions being discussed today will be documented in the frequently asked questions page on the website. And I think I put it in a little earlier, but here I'm going to add it to the chat box. And so that is honolulu.gov/Ala Wai is the main website. So thank you. We've just heard from, for those of you just joining us, we've just heard from some folks, including Dale Kobayashi, and what we're discussing right now are some problems. What you're seeing as you live and work in the watershed, the Ala Wai watershed, what are you seeing as far as problems when it comes to flooding? So far we've heard a little bit about residential roads running like a river. We've heard about debris being found and potentially exacerbating flooding and smaller streams. So what are some problems that you are seeing in your neighborhood? This is the time. Let us know. So let's see, who else is on that we can hear from? We've got Sterling Yee, the account labeled Sterling Yee. You can feel free to share, you're not on mute, or you can share over the chat. I posted a little earlier in the chat. If speaking loud is not your thing, you can share via email at alawai@honolulu.gov. Oh, okay, Sterling, you're on mute. So if you'd like to share.
Hi, I just got on, I'm just listening.
Hey. Okay, yeah, so what we're talking about at this point is we're gonna, in a little bit, have another breakout session, another discussion about potential solutions. But right now we're talking about the problem and trying to get specific information from what you all as residents are seeing relative to flooding in your neighborhood.
Okay.
On your street. So we've got a few folks on the line that are just labeled by their phone number. So if you're on the phone, feel free to share. That's what we're doing here. I've got a few folks that are labeled. There's Jean Ota, Kathleen Elliott Pahinui, Pauline Sukino, Taylor Date. So we are here and we are listening.
So I think for Manoa Valley, one of the we had kind of a teachable moment in 2003, which was the large flood that we had here, that I'm sure you're well aware of. And you know, I live on right on one of the Ala Wais that feed off of the main Manoa stream, and so I was home that evening watching it, and it I think was pretty apparent was that you know, the level of water coming down was pretty consistent despite heavy rain for a long time, and at one point it was obvious it was like a dam breaking. There was a large wave of water that just came. It came to my house basically, and it wasn't like a gradual building up to that level. It was pretty manageable, but it was that wave that basically, you know, put the car in the tree and, you know, caused all that damage all over the place, including at my property. And you know, the obvious thing to me was that, you know, there were things damming up the stream, you know, trees falling down up in the watershed that, you know, if I get like a large branch in my Ala Wai that doesn't get moved, it'll quickly turn into something big because everything will build up on it. So you have that happening up in the watershed. And so, and that was, as you know, I've been in the valley since 1964, and we've had some big rains, and we've never had any phenomena like that damage from that flood in 2003. And from what I saw earlier, with as hard a rain as you could have seen, it was not problematic if we did not have that kind of dam breaking phenomena, creating that wave of destruction that came through. So, and obviously easier said than done, but if we were able to make sure that there wasn't a buildup of waste in the stream, green waste that would cause this damming phenomena, I think that would go a long way towards stopping anything like that happening again, which was caused by the damming up of water and that dam breaking. Makes sense.
Great point. Thank you, Dale. Yeah, so we've heard from now a couple folks who are talking about green debris in streams, damming up water, slowing flow, and perhaps a problem is related to maintenance of some of these smaller streams, particularly relative to that green debris. Great point. Ellen, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the debris up in the stream and up in the upper watershed, it really is the problem. And if you didn't have these debris forming dams, you wouldn't get that wave like Dale said. And I think then the water will just flow. So I think it's a maintenance thing. And so that goes back to the city, right? So the city's not able to maintain the streams, clearly. And they want to have a new stormwater utility because they think that they could maintain the streams, and they're just plain not doing it. So Army Corps wants to build stuff, right? They're the concrete, pour it in, build it guys, right? But I think our issue in Manoa, Palolo is a maintenance issue. So it's a city issue. And no matter what the Army Corps does, they can't fix that because, we try to fix our city and we can't fix that. So you can't fix that. So I think that that's really where the problem is as far as Manoa and the upper watershed comes from. And we residents are frustrated with that because there's just no way to get it done. And volunteer nonprofit organizations have to try to do it for them and chip in. And that's not fair either. So I don't know, maybe through the Army Corps' project, they can get some federal funds and give it to our city so they can do their job of maintaining the streams. So that would be real helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Yeah, so what I hear you saying is that there's a lot of concern about the city and lack of maintenance in some of these smaller stream channels, particularly relative to the green debris. So I want to circle back to that in a second. But regarding the Army Corps and a penchant for pouring concrete and building stuff, while yes, engineers, definitely, I get that connotation, but that is not all that the Corps can do. So if folks will circle back or recall the presentation at the beginning of our meeting today, or if you didn't have a chance to tune in by then, you can also check it out on the website. But there are also non-structural and a lot more natural types of alternatives or options that are being considered. So we are not a one-trick concrete pony, so to speak. But I want to circle back to the maintenance comment. Thank you, Ellen. So what I'm hearing is the city and county can't maintain the existing streams and debris basins. So what makes you think that they could maintain whatever project is constructed after it's constructed? So the answer to that for the short term, and we can elaborate more on this in the future, but for now, prior to construction, a project partnership agreement, a PPA, would be signed between the Corps. Oh, sorry, Ellen, I can't hear you.
I understand all about PPAs. And one was on our doorstep
Okay.
last time for the in-stream detention basins and all this other stuff. And it doesn't matter, you see, if the city signs your document and says they'll do it, because they take our property tax dollars to do it and they aren't able to do it. So I think they are not capable of doing it. And they keep saying they want to do better. And they keep saying part of it is that parts of the stream are privately owned. So it's the private owner's problem, even if it's not private owner green debris that plugs up their area. So it's a real conundrum, but it doesn't matter to me, the PPA. It's only as good as a piece of paper and it's only as good as the signature and yeah, rah, we're going to do it. And they're not doing it. And they historically are not doing it and they're still not doing it. So even if you sign a PPA, it doesn't make any difference. It's a show and it's an agreement and it's going to encumber the taxpayers. And I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they are capable of coming up with a plan and doing it. They've never articulated one for all the streams, what they're going to do. And they've been able to say, oh, we have a round robin kind of thing. And every 5 years we'll get to your stream or some crazy thing of their schedule. And I really, I'm sorry to say, they can't do it.
Okay.
Thank you for your feedback, Ellen. And I hate to cut you short, but we're about to shift back from the breakout groups. So we'll have to circle back about that comment a little bit later. But I think we're back to over to Tyson. Over.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I heard some of that, Ellen, and that was great input. I think we had some issues here with the breakout. I apologize for this. It seems like not everybody got put into breakouts, so a lot of folks were back in the main room. Fortunately, we have Vera, who's a skilled facilitator, and it sounded like y'all had a really good discussion going on here. In my breakout room in number 6, we also had a really good discussion going on there. We were fortunate that Rhiannon Kucharski was there to help with that discussion. So I don't know about your other facilitators if you guys were able to use Crowdsource Reporter, but I think that we kind of got a mix of, probably some Crowdsource Reporter from what I saw in some of the groups, and a lot of discussion at the same time, and really kind of, I think, getting into Q&A type territory, and I think that's fine because that's clearly what where the needs are right now. People want to talk about these issues and ask a lot of questions, and that's really good. So even if you weren't able to use Crowdsource Reporter and post your comments on there, that's fine. If we had a good, healthy discussion, which it seemed like we did, that's really really healthy and helpful for us. So I think that's a good thing. I will try on this next one. Maybe what I'll do is I'll generate more breakout groups and see if that helps. But either way, we'll soldier on, and we'll make the best of it as we can today with what WebEx decides to give us. And again, if it's discussion, that's great too. But I do hope, and I'm going to paste it back into the comments were not being recorded. Somebody said, okay, well, that's obviously an issue. I just pasted the URL back into the chat just to make sure everybody has that. I would say save that in a file, in a Word file, or in your browser. Make sure that you've got that for the future, for after the workshop is over, so you can do stuff there. If there are issues with Crowdsource Reporter not recording things, then clearly that's something that we will have to deal with. So we'll get with our GIS guy and we'll figure that out. Yes, the workshops are being recorded and they will be available. So thank you all for all of your input in whatever form it was in that breakout group. We're going to go now to another one. So we'll try this again. And again, we'll do the best we can. And then after this breakout group, we will then have the Q&A, which will be the full room. It's not going to be small groups. It'll be everybody in the meeting will be together, and we'll be having a discussion and asking questions of the study team and so forth. So I'm going to try this one more time to send you into your breakout groups, and let's see how this goes. And again, I think it was productive last time, regardless of where you ended up. So, all right, breakout, here we go.
Wow.
Assignments, somebody's got a hot mic there. Let's see.
Are the breakouts being recorded by someone to chat here anyway?
Someone asked if the breakouts are being recorded. The breakouts are not recorded. I think, Roy, you asked that question. They're not recorded, but the facilitators are capturing the chat, copying those, and keeping a copy of them. WebEx does not do that automatically, so we're having to do that manually. If you have a comment that you want to be sure, that we get, then put it in the chat and/or send it to us by email to alawai@honolulu.gov. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start our breakout sessions again. Here we go.
Someone needs to record those chat features because it didn't happen in our group. I copied it off and sent it to Cindy, but I think if you need to copy off the chat, it's going to.
We're back. Yes, so it looks like, Winston, you were mentioning about recording what's happening in the breakout rooms and in the main room during these breakout groups. And the story there is, although they're not recorded, each of the facilitators in each of the breakout rooms and myself in the main room, we are taking notes. So we're going old school here, note taking. So I've been writing down what everybody's had to say. I see a new face on here, Daniela. I don't know if you just joined us, but yeah, so it looks like we're shifting to discuss, last round, we were discussing some of the problems that we're seeing. So we talked a little bit about inefficient drainage of gutters going right to the impervious surfaces, and maybe the possibility of instead directing gutter flow to pervious surfaces like lawns. So instead of driveways going to lawns, we talked a lot about the presence of debris in streams and how streams further up in the watershed are being maintained and where the funding for that maintenance comes from. So that was some of the stuff that we talked about in our last breakout group. For those of you that are just joining us, so far we've had a breakout group discussing problems. We're about to launch into a discussion of solutions. Before we got into that breakout group on problems, we had some introductions from the district engineer of the Army Corps of Engineers, Honolulu District, Lieutenant Colonel Marshall. We also had introductions from our mayor and from the head of the Department of Design and Construction at the City and County of Honolulu. We also had a presentation about where we are now in the process. And in a very small, perhaps a pistachio nutshell, we are taking a fresh look at the project. So no plans have been selected, and I guess the thing that we are hanging on to is the public feedback that we've gotten in past iterations of the project. So if you are an experienced stakeholder and you've commented before, thank you. We did not forget you. We've got that written down. And over the next period in the future, we're hoping to capture some of these comments that we've gotten in the frequently asked questions section of the new website for the new relaunch. So I have put that in the chat previously. I'll put it in the chat again. But that frequently asked questions page is at honolulu.gov/Alawai, and then you can find the FAQ section on the left-hand side. So now our current discussion at this time, we are going to be discussing your solution. So we've seen flooding in the past. A poignant example is the 2004 flood in Manoa that did so much damage to our university. And we want to hear your thoughts. So far on my list of people I can see on my screen, I see Dale Kobayashi. Thank you for commenting in the last round. Since I see you, if you'd like, you can have first dibs to give us some thoughts on solutions, or you can pass and we can move on.
Thank you, Vera. So, we'd gone through this in the first iteration, and, we have a group that came up with a lot of different alternatives. That was Save Our Ala Wai group, and most of those made a lot of sense to me. So, like I was saying earlier, I mean, I'm not an engineer, and I really defer to people like Dave Watase to really come out with what our ideas are. And I think from what we've been talking about before, it hasn't really changed. There are different ways to look at what we're doing, and what we came up with is definitely less intrusive to the Valley communities that I'm interested in protecting in this whole process. So we have a need to have balance between risk to our Valley communities and protecting our economic engine in Waikiki. So keeping that balance is important to me. And whatever solution we do come up with from people far smarter than I about these things, I just need to ensure that we keep that balance so that everybody is heard on this. And we do think outside of the box in terms of how to approach this.
Great point. Thank you, Dale. Yeah, so what I'm hearing so far is the need to minimize impacts and protect the Valley communities, and balance when it comes to putting whatever protection is selected in place to balance protecting the Valley communities with our economic engine in Waikiki. So great turn of phrase, I love that. Up next, I'm seeing somebody whose account is labeled Daniela. Daniela, feel free to share if this is a good opportunity for you. I'm afraid you're still on mute. I'm requesting, but if this is not the best time, you can also share in the chat box, or you can also email us at alawai@honolulu.gov. So for those of you that are just joining us, I'm going to post that email in the chat box again and say you can also share your input at alawai@honolulu.gov. Okay, so I will not forget you, Daniela. We will come back to you. Okay, who else have we got that I can see? We've got Hector. I don't think we've heard from you yet. You can feel free to share. We've got Taylor Date, Melvia Kabashima. We've got Kathleen. So if we haven't heard from you yet and you'd like to share, now would be a great time. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and share with us over the line here. Oh, I think I hear somebody.
Hi, it's Melvia here.
Hi, Melvia.
I'm community liaison for Councilman Calvin Say. Grew up in Manoa Valley, but I've certainly learned Palolo in the past 9 months as part of District 5. I was on another breakout group earlier and lost connectivity and ended up back in this one, but it sort of similar issues. Representative, this Brandon Au from Parks and Recreation Urban Forestry was talking about how their mission is to maintain landscape and forestry that retain the soil banks, and the problem with the streams is that they're concreted in some areas and natural soil in others. And right at Palolo Avenue and Pukele, the concrete culvert, which I think Army Corps of Engineers built many, many years ago, in the 50s maybe, becomes dirt soiled, and the stream has become a waterfall. I'm getting feedback, so I'm mute.
Yes, I hear you. Melvia, I'm sorry about that. Daniela, it looks like you've joined twice. So if you could please delete one of the things that you've joined, and then we'll hear from you next.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So for Daniela, it might be easier at this point if you wanted to chat in whatever comments you've got. And we've also, you can share via email at the alawai@honolulu.gov. And we'll see if maybe you can get some tech support where you are, and we'll come back to you. Melvia, sorry about that, about the echoing. You were talking about some kind of bad suspended sediment in one of the streams. Back over to you.
Okay. Yeah, it's an ongoing issue right now between the private property owners who are right at the turn where Palolo Stream is left turning down along Wailai. They've lost sizable square footage from their private property from Palolo Stream erosion. That stream has changed its routing as a result of probably those concreted areas north of it. So the stream is under Chaminade University ownership, but for a university to try to do soil embankments and all that, it's just a financial hardship, I think, for any private nonprofit to undertake something that is best for Army Corps of Engineers and federal funds and FEMA funds to remediate. That's a really hot spot there. It's a different kind of issue from the Woodlawn Bridge in Manoa, where stream maintenance island-wide is a problem. The Makiki stream at King and Kalakaua floods with every heavy rain when it's not maintained and the grasses are not trimmed back. So in January, Washington Middle School area was all flooded, about a foot in water for a few days. So stream maintenance and stream embankments are major issues. That's something for hydraulic and civil engineers to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvia. Great input. I've got that captured. I heard you mention 3 hotspots in particular. There was Palolo Stream by Wailai, involving loss of property and that it's under the ownership of Chaminade U. Of course, the Woodlawn Drive Bridge in Manoa and the Key Stream at King and Kalakaua. And sort of the overarching theme was stream and bank maintenance. So those are huge issues that need specialist attention, that we can't just ask any citizen to take on. So great point. Thank you, Melvia. Okay, Daniela, do we dare to have, let's see. Okay, it looks like you've joined twice. If you just joined the one time.
Can you hear me?
No. Nope.
I think she has joined
Okay,
3 times,
so
and you have to leave the meeting twice, and then you'll have one of you in the meeting.
thank you, Ellen. Awesome. Okay, we'll circle back to you, Daniela. Take a few minutes and try and work on that a little bit. And if this is just too much of a pain in the behind, feel free to comment in the chat, or you can always send an email. I just chatted that email out to everybody to alawai@honolulu.gov. So please share your thoughts. I'm so sorry. It's hard. Technology can be really hard. So thank you for sticking with us, and I see you there, so thank you. Okay, we've got some other folks in this main meeting room we haven't heard from yet. We've got a few folks just identified by their phone numbers, so feel free to unmute yourself. I see a few names here also associated with accounts. We've got Daisy Marai,
I'm Daisy.
Ota.
Hi, Vera. This is
Hey, thanks for
Daisy.
joining us. So,
Sorry, I was in another group with Daniela. My concern was that the city has already approved the Alapono Bridge, the Ala Wai Bridge that connects from right there at Waikiki over to where the park, the Ala Wai Park, next to Ala Wai School. The city has already approved that particular project. They're asking the federal government for another $40 million to complete the bridge. The study shows that they should have some kind of final draft of the completed bridge to be by either next month or later next year. The question is, what is the negative impact when you have something that's going to obstruct the canals area? As you know, you have also not only flooding from the streams, Manoa, Palolo, Makiki, you also might have a tsunami where the ocean water comes in and it'll be like a perfect storm right there. Right now it's going to be 180 feet tall. It's 250 feet across with that goes right into by the time the at the end of where the park is, which closes about 10 o'clock at night each night because of the city rules. How would that affect? There might be another bridge over by the convention center. That's a possibility, but not certain. But the city already has approved with the mayor, and DTS has already gotten money to fund, and they're asking for federal funding to complete a $46 million bridge, which all they needed for pedestrian and bicycling was originally only $5 million. So, I mean, wouldn't that structure also kind of block or somehow affect the way the ocean water and the flooding water coming down? Wouldn't that affect people and cause more flooding? I know originally it was with walls along the Alawai Canal, which might also consider instead of stopping the water, it might even cause more damage. And I'm not an engineer either, but I think the bridge is something we really have to look into, because I know they mentioned that they were working with the Army Corps of Engineers, but the question is, how effective is the bridge? Was the pumping station going to really take out and drain the water from there? Because it's going to affect a lot of people in a short time. So, I mean, that's a very interesting and important concern for the neighborhood, not only Waikiki, but to other areas of Kapahulu, where you leave Macaulay. So everyone will be inundated. So that also has to seriously be into consideration. Thank you.
thank you, Daisy. So just to recap what I heard, there's a couple concerns. One, in the first one you brought up was the impact of the new city Ala Wai bridge and whether that would be an obstruction that would exacerbate flooding. And you also asked about whether, if a pumping station was a potential solution, would that in fact be effective? And you also mentioned not to forget about whether that there would then be, from whatever solution is selected, I guess the feedback loop that would then cause more flooding in other areas like Kapahulu, and I believe you said Diamond Head. So hopefully I captured that okay. And if I missed anything, share it with me in the chat.
Yes.
Sorry, back to you, Daisy.
Becky, you covered everything in a nutshell, but these are very serious concerns because, as you know, we've had flooding with the king tides. We've already seen some water that overflowed from the Alawai Canal not too long ago. So these things are all happening now. and think of what was really happened with all the different earthquakes that's happening. Japan's one, luckily, it didn't affect Hawaii, or the Alaskan one didn't affect Hawaii. But according to Peter, I guess, I'm sorry, of the Emergency Management Center, he mentioned a 9-point plus tsunami earthquake generated from the Aleutian Islands would surely engulf the islands of Oahu and Hawaii, the whole island chain. So that is something to consider also. Thank you.
Excellent point. So thank you for bringing that up, Daisy, about whether we see that concurrently or even on its own impacts from earthquakes and tsunamis. And with sea level rise relating and tying in with king tides, that there are a lot of factors, both with rainfall coming down from watershed and water that may be coming up from the ocean. So these are serious concerns, and what I hear you saying is that it's happening now, and this is an urgent problem that needs fixing. So thank you for your comments. I have definitely got those down. Ellen, I want to come back to you in just a second, but we finally, yay, we heard from Daniela. Thank you for chatting that in. So Daniela, for those of you that are just on the phone, she chatted in, if you live next to the Ala Wai Park, you've probably seen the great amount of traffic to and from Iolani School and the parking problem that we have. The crime in Waikiki is a real issue. And Daniela says that they have children of 2 schools, not them, that there are children of 2 schools, the Ala Wai Elementary and Iolani School, that will have this, I think maybe you mean problem, so a problem to deal with. So I'm hearing concerns about traffic, parking issues, and crime. So thank you for bringing those up. That's really important. Hopefully I captured that in a good little verbal nutshell there, Daniela. So thank you for sharing with us. Okay, over to Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. It is my understanding, and maybe Dale will know something more about this, but when the Woodlawn Bridge was put in, it was supposed to go up and over. And because there's not enough clearance under it, and they keep dredging it as like a temporary Band-Aid, and then it fills back in with silt and stuff. Will the Army Corps be able to go back and maybe address some of the things in the original design that they did not do? And I think because the bridge is not high enough, it should have been on like a hill going up and down, then debris easily and silt get stuck under the bridge. The same with the Ala Wai Canal, was supposed to be open on both ends, and they didn't do that either. So in the Army Corps project, can we look at some of that stuff? Maybe we should open up the Ala Wai Canal already, and maybe we should raise the Woodlawn Bridge so there's more clearance under it, because those things just compound the problem. And it's just because they weren't built right in the first place.
Thank you, Ellen. So what I'm hearing is, will the review and potential modification, going back to the original design of some features that seem to have been designed one way and are functioning another? So the 2 examples I heard you give were Woodlawn Drive Bridge, specifically how the bridge floods and kind of serves as also a flooding obstruction at the same time, as well as the design of the Ala Wai Canal, originally designed to have 2 entryways. So that is a great question, and I have got it down. Thank you, Ellen. Okay, for the rest of our crew, who else have we still got here that I haven't heard from? I'm seeing a few phone numbers that are not associated with the name. I'm going to sending you a little request to unmute here. Drew, we heard from you about problems. If you've got any thoughts on solutions, we're happy to hear from you. Hector, we've got Hector Venegas. We've got somebody whose account says Yana or Jana. We've got Jean, Kathleen. Who else have we got with us? Roy, tailored date, and a Yangling Li. So for the folks that are with us, for folks that have just joined us, where we are so far in our meeting this evening, we started out with a presentation, sort of explaining where we are now and some introductions from the, Michelle, I see your hand up and I will circle back to you in just a second. I just wanted to recap of where we are. We heard from some of the leadership involved, including our mayor and the head of the Department of Design and Construction at the City and County of Honolulu. We heard from the district engineer of the Honolulu district of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And where we are in a very small nutshell is we are starting with a blank slate to consider public input on here's the problem dealing with flooding, riverine-based flooding in the Ala Wai watershed, and what are our options for resolving it. One of the primary things that we are taking with us from prior iterations is our public comments. So we still have records of those. We'll be addressing some of them in the days to come in the frequently asked questions page of the website of the latest iteration. And I posted that website a little earlier in the chat, and I'll post it again. But for those of you on the phone, it's honolulu.gov/Alawai, and Alawai is all one word. I'm posting it in the chat now. And the frequently asked questions page is it's a tab on the left-hand side. So hopefully you're able to join us. We've already had a little breakout session here in the main room so far about some of the problems that we're seeing regarding flooding, and we heard from folks about both stuff on the smaller scale, I guess smaller, and then cumulatively a large scale about impermeable surface and how rainwater is managed by residents, to debris in streams, to maintenance of the streams and the watersheds and the funding for that maintenance. And at this point, we're doing a breakup. This is our current discussion is about solutions to some of this flooding. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Matson. I saw you with your hand up. Michelle?
Thank you very much. I guess I belong to a breakout session number 1, and I will go to my room right after I say this. And that is a solution, that the Aloy Golf Course is an ideal central detention area for lowland flooding. And the Aloy Golf Course is preservation zone green open space. It should not be changed. So those two uses are very compatible for extreme flooding conditions. As a central location, that way you don't have to have remote detention basins. You can direct the waters to the Alawai as a major central detention area. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So I heard from some of the notes I'm taking is that the Ala Wai Golf Course is an ideal detention basin. We should keep it in its current zoning of preservation and green open space, and that using that location for a detention basin would be preferable to remote detention basins. So hopefully I captured your comment.
Can I try one more
I'm
time?
taking notes.
I could add that there are proposals to develop the Alawai Golf Course into an urban village, an alternative stadium mixed-use complex, and a Topgolf entertainment center. I think this would destroy the need for a detention basin where it's most needed. And we have to emphasize that this must be used for public safety and not exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Daniela, let's hear
Can you
from you
hear
next.
me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. I had all kinds of technical problems. Yes, I'm very concerned about the flooding because it will affect all these, the resident and the two schools, plenty of children and the park. And as a lady mentioned earlier, when there is a heavy rain, already the Ala Wai flood in the garden of Ala Wai school and not the Waikiki side, because the wall there is higher. The Ala Wai Canal wall is higher than on this side. So the risk for a flood is real. Also, in the previous study, before refreshing, bringing a new fresh look at the issue, the community had come up with some solutions and ideas. And I don't think I heard them mentioned at this meeting. So that even if we're looking in a refreshing way at the problem, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel because some good ideas have been presented. And about the bridge, there are, it has been, no, the community really didn't want it for 30 years. And it has been presented again and again and again, and has been presented with more appealing characteristics. And there are some appealing characteristics for sure, but there are basic problems that any appealing characteristics cannot substitute to the solution of these problems that another lady mentioned also. And I wrote it, which is parking, traffic, and crime. And then I also, I wonder why a bridge for such a short, narrow canal, is not very wide, Ala Wai Canal, why would need to have such a humongous structures that I forgot if it is how many, 150 feet high concrete. It's when some of the really large river don't necessitate such a structure, which we are something more in scale could have been suggested, but it's not just suggesting this rather than that design or structure. The fact is the community really don't think it's appropriate. And so no matter how every time is presented with great qualities and great design and this and that, it does not obfuscate the eyes of the community that doesn't really need it.
Daniela, thank you. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
that.
Daniela.
Thank you.
Daniela, I might say if that bulwark of a bridge goes in, all of the concrete abutments that will be on our Mauka side of the canal, as well as the Waikiki side, but on that side will absolutely jam up any floodwaters or stormwaters. They'll have no place to run off at all. It will be a giant, I don't not even call ponding, but it'll just be an absolute another flood problem that's going to be made.
Just for
Okay,
the record, I totally
thank you all.
disagree with those last two comments. I'm sorry. I don't think that they are correct at all.
Who's talking?
Okay.
Who's talking?
Thank all of you. I'm going to have to, I'm sorry to step in at this point. I'm going to have to cut this short, although we can continue it in the next session. And again, I apologize that we've had some technical issues here today, but I am glad to see that there's been some robust discussion. That is really good and that's healthy. We have ended the breakouts, and we have captured your chat, and many of us, the facilitators, have been taking notes. So really appreciate all of the input in all those discussions. We're now going to move to the Q&A portion of the evening. So again, I just want to quickly remind you of our ground rules. Post your comments and questions in the chat as you have been doing. Please keep your audio on mute unless you are the one talking, so we don't have a hot mic. Introduce yourself when you're speaking and say over again, and of course be conscious of acronyms and technical language. And once again, and this is very important, just be mindful of your colleagues and make sure that everybody has a chance to speak, because obviously we have a lot of folks that have a lot to say. So that's really helpful. I really appreciate that. Okay, so we are going to, oh, that's the last slide. Okay. So yeah, so I'm going to open up the floor to you guys, and again, I think that the best way, if you want to ask a question, is put it in the chat or raise your hand. I mentioned at the beginning that if you mouse over your name in the participant list, there's a little hand there, and you can click that. I see Sequoia's already done that, and so we will gather the questions from the chat and also call on you if you've raised your hand. I don't think we have. I could be wrong. I do see one phone number, so it looks like we may have one person who's on the phone only. So if you're on the phone only and you want to jump in, you can unmute yourself, and we'll go to you. I do hear a hot mic, so please remember to mute yourself. Okay, I'm going to call on Sequoia to start with, and then we'll see what's coming up in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So you said need to start just telling everybody my name and where I work, or just the name?
Yeah, I mean, you can just say who you are. I mean, at least your name. If you want to say where you work, that's great too, but that's optional.
Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Sequoia Riley. I am a PhD candidate at UH Manoa in the Urban Planning Department. And my question really is for the top government officials. Mr. Mayor, I would really like to get your input on this. Is, with all of the workshops that Army Corps of Engineer has put together, I was given information that the plan and workshops happened 20 years ago, but there was one that occurred pre-COVID in 2019, and I participated in that and suggested green infrastructure. That workshop included just getting everybody's opinions on both gray and green infrastructure. And in the end, Army Corps of Engineers rejected the proposal of adding in green infrastructure. So, and you have also had other workshops where you've had protesters from buy local community members who have participated, and it seems like no solution is really being reached at this point. And so my question is that why not include, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, why not include those who are protesting on what it is that you are planning to build? Because the thing is, a lot of the local community members are Native Hawaiians, and this was actually spoken to between my group during the breakout room session, that indigenous knowledge mixed with traditional scientific knowledge is an optimal approach when it comes to situations such as this, when it comes to sustainability and resilience. And so my question is, you have had so many people come to give their opinion, give their voice. Why not include them into the decision-making process?
Well,
Well, I appreciate the question, but I'm a little bit baffled by it, to be honest with you, because to my knowledge, nobody's being excluded from this process tonight. And we opened up saying that we wanted to learn from things past, and I wasn't part of the prior due diligence or discovery phase of this project. We've been in office now just coming up on 11 months. And as I said at the outset, if you were on the call, we're very grateful to the Army Corps of Engineers that they were to keep this alive. We have a chance, but you know, we've not boycotted or sanctioned or anybody out of this experience tonight. And we've said right on bullet number 1, please participate. Your input is critical. That's number 1. So I don't really kind of understand that. As far as your other comments, though, and I don't want to digress, but you know, I've gone outside and I've met, and the only other groups that have come here to protest have been the wedding planners and the people putting on structured events, because we're under the imposition, if you will, of the law of the land set by the governor's proclamation in a pandemic. And I had really great concern for them, you know, because we knew that industry, those industries were suffering, you know, and we try to listen to them. We try to be resourceful. And quite honestly, early last summer, before the Delta variant, we were able to open up, but then we had to shut those things down per governor's proclamation when the Delta variant reached its worst point. And then we reopened them only recently. So that's one. Number 2, I've met with the anti-vaxxers every time they've come here, you know, and it's a very insulting experience, but I go out there and allow myself to be called names that I really don't like, okay? But I don't have a solution for people who choose not to get vaccinated. But I do listen to them. I try to understand what they're doing. Well, we've been involved with this public health and trying to get as many people protected as we possibly can so we can reopen our economy. So I don't know really what you're saying, because nobody's being boycotted from here. We've addressed and listened to what people say, but you know, the anti-vaxxers are saying, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I'm also not I'm not the ultimate authority on this. The Department of Health is, and the rules are sort of what they are. So I hope that gives you some perspective. I'm on this call tonight because I really, on behalf of my own administration, as I said at the outset tonight, am very encouraged by the potential of this project, because for me, we've got to do something. I spent a lot of years in news media covering a lot of storms, and especially the last one that was involved on Manoa. And having gone to the University of Hawaii undergraduate and graduate school, I still can't believe the way that library was impacted. I went up there to see it personally. So, you know, I've seen this stuff. I've seen video of this stuff so many times, even in different places other than here. And so for me, this is something that's really absolutely essential. Just a question of what we do. And I understand some of the questions that are being asked. This is what we're looking to do, is to understand, and we'll come up with it. And I think the Army Corps of Engineers, at the end of the day, with all the input and everything else, I have a lot of confidence in them. We're going to come up with a plan that hopefully will be acceptable. Do I expect to please everybody on this? No, I don't think we could ever please everybody. But the idea here right now is to draw from the best of the thinking, hear what people's concerns are, be transparent in the process, and do the very best job we can. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Mr. Mann.
Thank you.
And Sequoia, thank you for your comment and your question. And I want to reiterate what the mayor said and what you were asking for, which is that we do incorporate the stakeholders' input. And again, that's what we're here for today, and we are going to continue to do that throughout the study. So if you have input, again, in addition to today, we're going to continue to be open for business on our email account, and we're going to have another workshop on Saturday when hopefully WebEx will cooperate a little better. And if you all would like to join us again on Saturday, you're more than welcome. So thank you so much. And I'd like to see if anyone else would like to ask a question.
I would. I think Sequoia was saying that she thought the community should have a seat at the actual table where the decisions and the planning is done, rather than in the information gathering section. I think Major Blangiardi misunderstood what she was saying. She was saying there's levels of community engagement, and we're at like level 2, information gathering. We want to be moved to level 3, where you have actual input. I think that's what she was just saying. Is that correct, Sequoia?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Sydney.
Well, I misunderstood, Sydney. I misunderstood.
Okay, well,
I just took it to be on its face value, because right now, I'm with this process on where we are tonight, not phase 2, phase 3. It's our opening session. So that's where I was in this moment now.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the, because I think that's what she was saying. I just wanted to be clear that, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate
yeah.
what you just said, and I
Thank
now
you.
I understand.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think again, we're you know, we want to be to include you know, we would like to do that. We would like to include stakeholder input as much as we can in the process. So yeah, so I mean, I fully am on board with that that comment. I would like to go to some other questions that folks have about the study, you know, or about whatever it is. There were a lot of robust discussions going on in the breakout groups.
Well,
I'm sure that some of you would like to continue some of that here.
Before moving, I would like to respond to Tyson. We have been providing a lot of input to many community meetings. We needed to see your analysis of those input. You're just saying that this will be done in the next stage. You have to create some trust that you are able to process professionally, engineering, ecologically, all the good suggestions from many experts of the community that together have more expertise than your agencies in addressing this complex problem. So that needs to be done, and it's not going to be done unless, as I said in the small group, that the city, the federal government, and the state have a memorandum of understanding on how you would collaborate within your respective responsibility in analyzing the proposal, in developing solution, processes, and management. This is what is missing. That's why the community don't trust you. And that's why we got flooded in the past. Where is the memorandum of understanding on how we are moving forward? Today we heard a lot of nice lectures about the planning process and so on, that is the same like before. You have to show some result now. Already we spent a lot of taxpayer money to the federal government, and we did a lot of work here for several years with the Ala Wai, and let's see some output, collaboration between the city, the LNR, and the LNR. Thank you very much.
No, I appreciate that comment, Mr. Minervi, and you know, I don't know if we disagree with you. I mean, I think that we also want to get this done, and we want to do those analyses of stakeholders' input and you know and other things that we can generate on the team. You know, we will do those analyses and we will get this done. So I can certainly understand, given the history of this study, those feelings that you have. So I appreciate that comment. Does anyone else on the study team want to add anything to that?
May I say something, sir? I have a question. I brought up the comment about oh, by the way, my name is Drew. Sorry about that. I brought up the problem of, you know, a lot of the flooding by the bridges happens because of the fallen debris, mostly trees, branches. What is the city's maintenance schedule for clearing streams? Because that would help. To me, maintenance of getting things out of the stream would help the bridges from being blocked, from flooding, over flooding the bridges. Over.
You know, Drew, this is Rick Blangiardi again. We don't have Department of Facilities Maintenance on the call tonight, Dr. Roger Babcock, and I'm going to ask him if he'll join us on Saturday. But as I understand it, we have 186 streams. I might be wrong on Oahu, of which I think there's a scheduled maintenance of some 11 a year. We already dealt with, we're already doing a big project with the Army Corps outlet by Lely Stream because of the floods we had earlier this year. but some of the streams have just been neglected for a very long time, and we're actually in the process of trying to hire some people. I don't know how much we can increase the number of streams that we can clean up, but we could do more. Some of the stuff near the streams, as I heard speakers say, he's not on the call, I don't think right now, maybe he is. We're saying some of the stuff belongs to the property owners adjacent to the streams. I'm not sure of all the rules, but I was listening to that really kind of curious. But right now, I think that's the way it is. And so we're trying to make up for a lot of stuff. We're not gonna be able to make up for all of that. It's just a real concern. We have a real hazard on our hands, and we're trying to deal with the, quite honestly, some long overdue maintenance. I don't know how else to say it. And that makes this project seem even that much more critical to me because of the liability we have inherent from the standpoint of a lot of things just need to be done.
Thank you, Mayor.
Drew, let me even add a little bit more color commentary on that a little bit. This is what actually keeps me up at night is floods and overflowing streams and how we're going to deal with that both programmatically and as a capital infrastructure solution. So in kind of round numbers, the city is responsible for 10% of the streams that are on Oahu. 90% of the streams are privately owned. Of the 10% of the streams that the city is responsible for, we do about 1% we maintain through either a CIP project with DDC or a DFM, the 3.5 people that do the stream cleaning because of the money we've got and the people that we've got. They do about 10% of the streams that the city owns per year, and they're prioritized based on complaints. It's a complaint-driven system. But the bigger problem here is that the privately owned streams are the responsibility of the private owners. And we tell them that there's a problem. There are letters that the city writes and has written long before Alex Kozlov got to this table and said, hey, you've got a problem that is causing a stream to fill and you need to maintain because you own it. And sometimes those stream owners will come to the table and fix their stuff. Sometimes, most of the time, they don't. And that's where the problem really is that this is a collective solution between the city and private owners of the existing conditions. And that's, just some of the color commentary that I can add to what the mayor just said.
Well, and I appreciate that. Alex, obviously, is head of our design and construction, knows a lot more about that, but that's why I was alluding to what Calvin Say was saying earlier. How many of these streams are privately owned? Look, I make no pretense about it. I've been in office for 11 months. These are the kind of data points that we're learning quickly. But like I said, when you have private residents, private owners of streams not cleaning them, it's a liability. And I know that. So we're trying to do everything we possibly can as quickly as we can.
Thank you, sir. I understand that point. I live in Palolo, and then part of the stream is part of our property. So whenever there's a storm or there's water coming down there's branches, we normally go down and pull the branches out and get rid of them. We actually cut down some java plums along the bank because they're problematic because they're weak trees. So I understand that point. I just was wondering, what your folks' take was. I know it's the city has a portion of the streams that they maintain, but a lot of it is privately owned. But I just wanted to see what you folks, what your answer was. But I appreciate your input and your answer. I just wanted to hear from you folks, so I appreciate it. Thank you. Over.
Drew, let me also
Hey, Tyson.
Let me also thank you, Drew, for doing what you just said that you do, because there are many responsible owners that actually pull washing machines and tires out of the streams that are associated with their house and when they're a piece of property, and we thank you for that, and we notice that, and we know that. By no means are we letting this slide. We got to fix this. We know that. This is what I said. This is, if there's one problem that keeps me up at night, this is it. So I thank you for what you do, and what other homeowners and property owners do the same thing that you do, and there's many that do. and there's a few that don't, and I'm being tongue-in-cheek about that. But thank you.
Could I make a comment?
Hey, Tyson?
Hold on just a sec, Laura. I'd like Jeff to have a chance to respond as well.
Hey, Laura, and I'll try to be brief. I'm sorry. My name is Jeff Herzog. If you all don't know who I am, I've been communicating and working with you all for the last 3 years since that a wonderful evening in the Manoa Community Park Gym in March 19th, 2019. And so I will tell you that I agree 100% with Dr. Minervi that we need to be able to establish and build that trust and relationship. And I have to be honest with you, I am an optimist, but I have to tell you that I do believe over the last 3 years that we have improved our communication and relationship two-way between us. And I understand you haven't seen the results that you've been looking for from the perspective of a new project yet. But the fact that we have this study going on at all is as a result of the partnership and the relationships that we've built between the federal government, the city and county of Honolulu, as well as the community. When we found the cost growth in December of 2020 because of the constraints of the congressional authority, the first question that was asked to us, why shouldn't we just terminate this project now and just not move forward at all, because it's clearly too expensive and there's clearly no solution here. And we were able to take the feedback not only from the community but from our experts and demonstrate that there is a federal interest, there is a need to reduce flood risk in this community. And so it was through that partnership with the community, with the city and county, that we made a case to advance this study to this next phase. And that's why under these conditions, now we have an opportunity here to take those sideboards off, take those restrictions of that previous congressional authority off, and find out what is the appropriate project that maximizes the benefits to the community, but is cost effective and it's maintainable. And so this is just the start of that. So everything that was previously contributed to us, we have on file. It was published in the EDR. We will share it with this team. I'm still on this project team. Cindy Ockpaul, which many of you remember from, as she was always by my side for the last 3 years, she is still on this team. We are continuing this effort moving forward with new opportunities. We're not starting over from scratch, and we're not dismissing anything or everything that was previously provided. And so we look forward to this. This community has always been respectful. This community has always been loving and welcoming and willing to have a conversation. And that's what we need to continue moving forward. So I thank you. And Laura, it's always good to see you. And I'll pass the mic to you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd just like to know, there was a man at the end of the last chat session that said something that wasn't the case of what I said. If a person can identify themselves, let me just say, I've watched any flood event that has happened in our neck of the woods at the Ala Wai Park, and it floods up and it naturally goes away. We've had ducks and fish and all there over the years. And what will happen is any obstruction that's going to be put in the way, which is the proposed bridge buttresses, will absolutely gum up the whole works and probably send the water right back into Ala Wai School at some high level or something, because you have to have 150 feet of ADA off ramp, and you have to have other ramps that somehow make the bridge, the bike path go over the bridge or under the bridge, whichever way. If those planners for that bridge, the proposal, really had solutions that they thought they could get through the community, they would have presented it already. But the fact is, there are no visual images at all of what they planned, and that is the real concern. So if you're doing something that's going to be added in before this whole process gets underway with the flood mitigation, things are going to have to be unjammed. And I think that it would be very good to understand what it is that's really coming in there. And if the man who did speak to me at the very end could identify himself, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Laura. And I see that Winston has his hand up as well, and then Nathan. So we'll go to Nathan after Winston. Winston, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for this meeting tonight, Tyson, and Mr. Marin. I think I see Managing Director Formby there as well. and our director from facilities and maintenance. We're happy to have you here. And it's interesting because in our chat groups that we had with Cindy, and I did send her and copied off the chat what was there, but essentially we didn't talk about any specific issues at all, because we felt really that this is putting the cart before the horse. We need to, while this feels like a better start and a fresh start, and you've learned obviously from March of 2019 a little bit, it still can't be construed as significant or meaningful community input with just 2 of these sessions before a draft plan is then put, which is then going to be fought against. So the suggestion was made that something to the effect that you go back to, and I realize, like what Jeff said, you're taking all that information, which is great, but maybe the whole team needs to look at that and dissect it and maybe pull it into 8 major groups. Maybe this is the tunnels group. Maybe this is the view plane group. Maybe this is the dam, the detention basins. Maybe this is the water flow engineering group. I don't know, something along those lines based on submitted testimony of others, but also looking at protect our Ala Wai watersheds. And if the city administration isn't aware of that now, it happened, we had a meeting 3 years ago where about, I don't know, 15 or 20 groups came together at the Ala Wai Forum, Ala Wai Golf Course Clubhouse. And this was a direct response of citizenry saying, wait a minute here. And I think there's a lot of us feeling that pressure again. And if you could identify, I don't know that I submitted testimony, certainly, and I don't think I got notice that this meeting was happening tonight. So while we're reasonably engaged stakeholders here, you can crowdsource this huge, immense talent here to work with your team for the benefit of this project, because I think people want to see a successful project at the end of the day. And but to do that, we have to have robust, meaningful, significant, sustained community input. And it's not going to happen in these 2 meeting sessions that you have planned before a draft is happening. So I would suggest that we break out into these groups. Maybe the tunnels groups meets every other week on Tuesdays from 5 to 8, and the ecosystem restoration groups meet on Fridays, or something along those lines, whatever that may be. But that if you came back to us and said, hey, we've heard you, we've listened to you, we can't just have a session like this where I'm talking about the trees falling in my stream and I'm talking about Aloy restoration, because it's not significant, meaningful, deep, or effective to have a conversation like this. So if you come back to us at the city level and say, hey, we're taking the next month to really actually do the deep dive, you've made the right noises tonight and indications that this is something that you want to do. So if you come back from this and listen to the community and say, we're going to just actually re-look at this and say, how do we take the deeper dive before we even pretend we're going to come up with a draft resolution, I think you'll find much more community support, because you've engaged people in the beginning. And there's a lot of trust that needs to be regained here with the community. And really, that protect our Ala Wai watersheds. I encourage everybody to go there and look what has posted there, the various groups that have posted there, as well as Stop Ala Wai Project. There's great engineering analyses there, as well as all of the comments. So I would just encourage the city and the Corps to go back, break up into groups, invite us, the public, into those various groups, and then come back together in larger meetings and present our findings as we move along, so that we really feel like they've been incorporated into whatever plans come out. And anyway, thank you for holding this meeting tonight. And I hope that we can have some sort of movement on that, so that our actual points that have already been really well discussed in comments and suggestions and letters hitherto can then be reincorporated into what we're looking at now.
Appreciate that, Winston. Thank you so much. And I agree. I mean, clearly, as multiple people have said, it's important to build and rebuild trust, and just having one workshop, that's not going to be sufficient. And so we recognize that, and we'll be working at it. I want to know if does Alex or anyone else on the study team would like to respond to Winston's suggestions.
Yeah, so This is Eric Merriam again, the study lead. And once I totally understand your points. And I will say that, you know, we don't just have 2 public engagements prior to the development of a draft plan. You know, we have at least one more suite of public engagement meetings where we talk about measures that were screened and why, and kind of how they appear to be developing into a series of alternative plans prior to any release of a draft report. And again, I just want to also note that the avenues for communication will continually be open. I think, you know, if we kind of go back to the planning process, you know, slide, the Army Corps of Engineers does have a pretty specific planning process, right? And public engagement, as I mentioned, is a very critical piece of that. But, you know, one comment I have is that to engage the public to the extent that you just suggested, you know, really goes beyond the scope of what we can probably do within the context of the funding that we have, right? It takes a lot of effort to put these things together. And again, you know, I'll say that we have a process that is informed by public input. But I'll say that, you know, too much, I'll say, can kind of derail the process as well, right? And so we need to make sure that we're focused and that we utilize the tools and the processes that have been developed for these Army Corps studies, right? And so I just want to say that, and I'm not dismissing your comment. I fully understand the importance of public engagement and the desire of the community at large to have a seat at the table, which was spoken earlier. And so, you know, I just want you to know that the team is really trying to walk that line of what is realistically feasible within the context of the process and the funding and the time that we have, right? Because again, we also have to do this in a certain time. So, you know, we're trying to walk that line of what is possible and what is feasible, and what can be done, right? And trying to maximize and kind of meet the desire of the community at large. And so that's all I'll say. I know that probably doesn't really help answer the question. I just also want you to know that I definitely hear your comment, and you know, I'm not taking it lightly. I just want you to know that we are trying to maximize engagement. As you mentioned, we're trying to start early and we're trying to start strong, right? And we're trying to continue that forward to the extent that we can, while still meeting the schedule and budget that we have to meet. Over.
Yeah, and I think that that's a valuable point as well, Winston, to think about how to structure that engagement in a way that, you know, is as productive as possible. So I appreciate that too. Yeah, certainly we're going to try to maximize it as much as we can. So thank you. I want to go now to Nathan Dube. You've had your hand raised for a bit, and I see, Laura, you've got yours raised as well afterwards. Go ahead, Nathan.
Mahalo. Aloha kako, everyone. Sorry, I don't know too much about the man-made structure kind of stuff. I'm more of a green infrastructure guy. So I guess I have a few questions and just a little bit of commentary. I'll keep it brief, but how much emphasis is going to be placed on collaboration with groups that are already doing successful flood mitigation work in the Mauka regions? And will there be any funding opportunities for conservation groups and other resource management groups to increase their efforts for green infrastructure? Because I think some of these problems, I definitely not all, but I would say, you know, quite a bit can be solved by reinvesting in things like conservation and green infrastructure. Most of our projects are shovel ready. We control some of the most invasive species in the world. Some of our partners, they focus a lot on fencing the watershed or albizia control or stream restoration. And I think that the more effort that we can put forward to that and not reinvent the wheel, the more it's going to help the overall Ala Wai watershed flood mitigation process. So I guess I would encourage the group to really take a deep dive into what's already existing here for green infrastructure and how you can support some of those groups that have very robust outreach departments that interact with the public on a regular basis in these neighborhoods, in these communities. We heard from Drew in Pololo, who has a lot of debris washing up, and you know, if we're focused more on the bridges and the stream crossings and removing debris, that's good, but we're not really fighting the source of the problem, which a lot of it is washing downstream from albizia coming and infiltrating the native forest. And then we have, Myconia, one of the worst 100 weeds, one of the worst 100 invasive species in the world that is known to be one of the most prolific flooding exacerbating species that we know of. And it's right here in our backyard in the Ala Wai. And at this current funding atmosphere, it's really difficult for all of our groups to acquire funding. So yeah, I guess my two main questions are will there be funding opportunities for other groups to participate in flood mitigation? And if there are, will there be any emphasis placed on ongoing projects that are shovel ready, that have shown success and can immediately create green jobs with any kind of infusion of capital? Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Nathan. Eric, is that something that you can answer?
Yeah, so I guess my first comment is, as kind of the crowdsourced reporter tool was laid out today, I'd be really interested to kind of have you go in and put locations on a map for work that's ongoing, or studies that are ongoing, or projects that are planned with respect to green infrastructure. That information is really valuable to us. And the question about if there's an opportunity to have other groups sit at the table in terms of, I guess, that's a little, I mean, right, all those groups are actively encouraged to participate in these types of sessions. The focus of this study will be for the study team to develop a plan, right? That plan could be independent, right, of the ongoing projects, or it could, if you were able to kind of document locations where studies have shown that things might be beneficial, it could very well incorporate aspects of plans that have been ongoing. So I guess my point is that those represent opportunities for us and potential solutions that we could kind of put into this study. Now, with respect to collaboration in terms of funding, we as the study team, as a result of this study, will identify a plan that we, will hopefully recommend for implementation to reduce risk within the watershed. And that plan will be standalone. And so it wouldn't necessarily, be built upon ongoing efforts, if that makes sense. And so, really, I think we would identify a plan that would be implemented by the federal government in coordination with the sponsor, and not, I think, the opportunity to engage other groups with additional funding is most likely going to be minimal. Although I will open the floor to any other respondents, discussants to augment that answer if needed. Over.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Let me jump in. Winston with Outdoor Circle. Sir, when you spoke both in November and December of 2020, and specifically pointed out your interest with the trees down along the Ala Wai Canal that are considered, that entire promenade being historic properties and everything. We identified Outdoor Circle at that point in time as a cooperating agency for the programmatic agreement. So your agency, specific to Outdoor Circle, will be discussed under the NHPA and the Section 106. So I do want you to be aware of that. And then in reference to everything going on in the chat, Sydney Lynch, and then Nathan, you bring up great points. And Eric pointed out, and he put a terraced floodplain when we talked about those natural-based solutions. And in my small group, we discussed it about securing the fence line and removing the albizia. And Dr. Ken Kaneshiro of the Hawaii Exemplary Foundation has a similar suggestion for removing the albizia and reforestation with kukui nut. So all of those things, if they can be attributed to reducing the sediment flow and reducing the flood risk, will absolutely be evaluated. And so those I don't want you to think that by putting it in crowdsource or putting it in this chat that we're balling it up, throwing it in the trash can, saying it's ecosystem restoration, we don't have to think about it again. Absolutely, that's not the case. And so I just want you to understand that, your groups are not the only groups out there with these ideas, and we're trying to capture everything from the Ala Wai Watershed Collaboration to the Hawaii Exemplary Foundation. And Nathan, I'll be honest, this is the first time we've been introduced to your group. And so I would encourage us to link in with you and get some more information. So that way, like you said, why duplicate effort? let's find some efficiencies by combining efforts.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that question, Nathan.
Just one right on. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Aloha.
Yeah, appreciate it. And I think this may be a good point to bring in Rhiannon Kucharski. Rhiannon, if I could ask you, you had an explanation for the optimal solution that we're going to be working towards, and it seems like that might be worth repeating here to the entire group. Would you be able to do that? You may be muted.
I'm sorry, I think I might have been on mute. Thank you, Tyson. I'm happy to do that, but before I do, I saw that the mayor had his hand raised, and I wanted to be respectful and defer to him in case he wanted to make a remark or comment before I do that.
Good call. Mr. Mayor, you may be muted. Might be on your phone. I'm not hearing your audio. Or if you moved your mic, maybe it got unplugged. Okay, let's go back to the mayor as soon as he is ready. He's having some audio issues. I'm sure we'll get that straightened out soon. So, Rhiannon, you want to go ahead?
Sure, Tyson. So yes, in my breakout group where we were discussing, we had a great question, which is, how does the core process allow for the selection of the plan that's recommended, and what are the parameters? So in law, for this type of project, which is flood risk management, and also can consider coastal storm risk, especially as we have some tidal influence, obviously in the bottom end of this watershed, we are looking to maximize net benefits to the nation in reducing flood risk. So that's risk to life and human safety, to property, in relation to responding to an emergency and recovering from an emergency. And so that is the parameter within which we have to operate. And so that plan that we have to select, the one that maximizes net benefits to the nation, is called the National Economic Development Plan. And that is the plan that sets the level of federal investment. We are allowed to consider a locally preferred plan in the mix if that is something that's desired and fits within additional policy parameters that are set up in law, and can include, things that are preferred, yes, Steve, to the nation. And so those are the parameters in which we operate. And this funding is from an emergency supplemental bill from Congress to address flood and coastal storm related emergencies. And so we are explicitly not allowed to spend any of this money on ecosystem restoration. We can look at natural and nature-based features that will have benefits to flood risk reduction or coastal storm risk reduction. And as was said earlier, we can look at, ecosystem restoration separately or in parallel under different funding, and that is something that is definitely being discussed. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. Appreciate it. I want to go back to the mayor. Mr. Mayor, do you have your audio issues sorted out?
It sounds like they just asked us to move on. They're having some audio issues, so we'll just move on, and if they get it worked out, we'll have
Okay. Okay, in that case, Laura, you've had your hand up a while.
Yeah, just 1 second. I just wanted to let people know that this was in 2015 that I submitted this, and I did find it. I'll send the whole thing in. This is what already exists along the Ala Wai Canal, and actually, if it were across on the Ala Wai Boulevard side, the arches would be filled in, but it would still be a gracious looking wall, and it would have still the viewing planes and be an awful nice way of adding to the rest of the community. So just wanted to show you that. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. Oops. Okay. All right. And Sydney, you had your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for holding this meeting. I wanted to address, Nathan's, what he said. And for me, I think that you really need to address the problem, the cause of the problem, which is the erosion at the top of the mountains. And the Army Corps, we were told last time, really only works once in the water. The water's in the waterway. So that becomes a problem with all of the other things that are feeding into the stream. For instance, the storm drains in the Makali-Moili area are a main cause of flooding there, and that's a city responsibility. So the Army Corps ends up developing this plan that is very much in the streams, very much concrete based usually, but it needs to be able to work with these other groups to stop the erosion at the top of the mountains, stop the albesias, like Nathan was talking about. And unless you can have this holistic situation, and maybe you need a bunch of smaller efforts, as Mayor Blangiardi was saying, the DFM, Department of Facilities and Maintenance, they don't have a dedicated stream cleaning fund. They don't have the money. They don't have the manpower. But all of this $356 million, which is what the project was going to cost originally, if that could come and be used in smaller ways, then maybe you don't need this super big, expensive, type of concrete project. But the Army Corps is so constricted by your lady was just saying, by your emergency funding, that it seems that you can't bring all these other groups in, because these groups need funding. There's already a lot of efforts in the watershed, the Kolau Mountain Partnership. The DLNR has a project with them, but they don't get funded. It's only $1.4 million. That's nothing, but they don't get the money. And so these projects can't be done. But we're going to go out and spend $356 million, and we're not going to address the factors that feed into this. That's what's, you educate the people who live on the streams so that they don't throw their trash in them. We see people all the time throwing stuff in them, tiles off their houses. The city could use some of this money, send them notices, send out people to them after COVID and say, hey, you can't be throwing your mango tree off the bridge. You can't be throwing your roof tiles, your car parts. That's where we need to be spending the money. And I know that the people at the top, Senator Schatz and everybody, they're doing their job. They're getting the money from Washington to come in and help us. And we need the flood planning, but we also need the small money as well. And that's what I think the community is really frustrated by, is that, and Jeff Herzog understands it. He knows we need the small money, and that's what we need the help in. Okay, so I really appreciate all your efforts, and I'm glad the mayor's listening. But I think for the community, that's where we're coming from. Thank you.
Well said, Cindy. I appreciate that. Some of what you're describing are what Eric was talking about as non-structural measures, and I think could be considered. And as others have said, Rhiannon and Eric, we also have other authorities as well and other programs that those things could apply to. So, one thing that the Corps of Engineers talks about a lot is an integrated water resources management approach, which is a systemic approach. And sometimes, we do that, and sometimes we fall short. But that's certainly what we aspire to, and that's kind of what I think you're talking about here. So I hear you. That was a really a good comment. Thank you. Anyone else before I go to, I see Tom's got his hand up, but before I go to Tom, does anyone else on the study team want to say anything, add anything to what I just said? good. Okay.
I think you captured it with Rhiannon's comments previously. I mean, you know, comment taken. But I think you captured it. Over.
Okay. All right. So Tom, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Tyson. Some of us in the breakout group number 3 certainly had some of this discussion with Eric. My comment is this. It would be very helpful, and I have not thoroughly reviewed everything on the new website for this, but for some of the terms being used this evening, trying to distinguish between ecosystem restoration or nature or natural based elements or things like that, it would be extremely helpful to have posted, one, the agreement with the city for this study, so we can know what some of the parameters are in that regard. Secondly, a brief kind of Q&A, if you will, or FAQs on several of the points that keep coming up, such as whether ecosystem restoration can be included, or more particularly, what exactly is the funding language for the current effort. I'm making that distinction, what should I say, post December 2020, but what in fact is the appropriation language from Congress? Because you just, one of you just made a very important statement, I believe it was Jeff, that ecosystem restoration is, I'm sorry, Rhiannon made the comment that ecosystem restoration was specifically beyond the scope of this effort. And yet there are ways to still address some of the elements or whatever. So at least as a starting point, by a couple of key references and language, if we could have that information posted, and you know, in the coming weeks, that will help a lot, I believe, in terms of being able to better focus on you know, what the scope is and how some of us may advocate for enlargement of that scope or whatever. Thank you, Tyson.
Thank you, Tom. And we will have some FAQs that we'll put up on the website, and that's going to be sort of a live document that we'll continue to add to as we get more and more questions. So, you know, yeah, so I think that's a great idea. I want to ask Eric, if you want to respond to some of Tom's other comments.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think your point about the FAQs, and we had this discussion. So the distinction between ecosystem restoration and kind of the natural nature-based measures that we can implement as a part of a flood risk management study, you know, you're right, that this is going to keep coming up. And so putting some language on the website to make that distinction very clear will be important for us and for those trying to engage in the study as we move forward. And just briefly, the comment that I made during our breakout group is that, you know, ecosystem restoration in terms of how it's defined by the Corps is essentially implementing some feature to improve the ecosystem for the sole purpose of improving the ecosystem, right? To have some ecological benefit, whereas the natural and nature-based measures that we are implementing or we can implement as part of this study and any subsequent project have to have some flood risk reduction benefit, right? So you know, they can improve the ecosystem, but they have to have some flood risk reduction benefit in order to be incorporated into this study and any subsequent project. And so I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that, but you're absolutely right. We'll add that to the FAQs and make whatever, you know, make sure that that's distinguished or, you know, defined on the study site. Over. But yeah, great points, Tom. Over.
Before we move on, anybody else? Jeff, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I'll only add that some folks in the chat had talked specifically about the reforestation. And so what I told my breakout group is if you take out the shallow root albizia trees that at any level of rain topple over, go down the stream and block your bridges, or shallow roots. They don't hold the soil in place, and so it creates a sediment flow issue downstream and creates blockage and decreased capacity. So if you take that out and you replace that, it's a flood control measure. While it improves the ecosystem and gets rid of the invasive species, it's targeted at reducing the flood control. And so if you take out a concrete channel and you replace it with a more natural line channel or some curves in there to reduce the speed of the water and the conveyance of the water, while it improves the ecosystem, it is also focused on flood risk management. So those are the things that this team is going to look at moving forward. While it will improve the ecosystem, that's great, but we're utilizing the measures for the purpose of flood risk management, and that's how they're tied together. We're not focused strictly on increasing average habitat units of oopu and other invertebrates. Those are opportunities that come with the ecosystem and the flood risk management. Over.
Okay. Tyson, this is Alex. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Great. We can hear you.
Great.
Go for it.
Can I address Tom's question?
Please.
So Tom asked a very germane question going forward about how we capture all the comments. So the mayor and I have been jumping between all the particular breakout sessions, and I got to say that there's pages and pages of notes that we have collectively taken. We have heard literally dozens, if not hundreds of ideas, and I wish we could answer all of them today. But the idea here is that the planning team, the design team, are going to review everything that we've captured, and we will answer either the themes, maybe not every single specific question, but certainly the themes of and the collective ideas of most of the questions, and we're going to put it on the website. And to Tom's point, within the next few weeks, probably kind of at the end of the 30-day period that the crowdsource tool is still on, we will be putting in either information on FAQs or white papers or addressing the things that have come up in today and have come up on Saturday. If you don't see it, ask it again. It's not because we deliberately didn't answer. We just may have missed it because there's literally hundreds of comments. But the goal here is, my goal here is to make sure that we answer as many questions as we can and use that website as a way for you to get those answers. And Tom, I hope that helps.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, and I think that, one of the themes, I think, of this discussion where there's a bit of frustration, and I see it in the chat, is people want to be heard and want to have as much input in the process as they can, and sometimes I think that it's frustrating because we do have a process which is governed by rules and regulations and laws, and there are limits, obviously, to how much we can do. And I understand the frustration that sometimes it doesn't feel like it's enough. And as I said earlier, I also understand that just having one workshop is obviously not going to just suddenly, everyone's going to trust us and believe everything that we say. But, rest assured that we really do want to incorporate as much stakeholder input as we can at every stage of the process. We want to max out whatever it is that we can, and it's fine if you feel like you need to see more, then stick to this channel. Keep watching us, see what we do with this information. We're going to take in everything that people are providing us and consider it. So yeah, just please stay engaged. it's really encouraging to see, you know, as the commander said earlier, you know, that people care. And so that's great. You know, just please stay honest, keep providing your input. You know, I think that's all good. We are coming down to 3 hours here in a couple minutes, I believe. I don't want to cut us short if there are people who have some burning questions. So we can stay on a little bit longer, but I also don't want to take up too much of people's time either. So I don't see any hands up at the moment.
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is Ellen Watson. I just wanted to say hi, Jeff.
Hi, Ellen.
And I give, we're all friends, yeah. And I give you credit for doing the GRR because you said you were gonna, and here you are doing it. So thank you. Now
Thanks,
I hope
Ellen.
you can listen to all of us. Okay, thanks.
We will absolutely do our best. Is there, so I see a lot of stuff going on in the chat. I do want to welcome anyone who's, you know, active there to raise your hand. Oh, I see Tom actually raised his hand. Let me go to Tom. Let's go back to Tom. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Tyson. My point's real simple, and that is this is and will continue to be a ongoing conversation. There's a lot of dynamics here. As you wrap up, if you could just give a hint, any distinguishing aspects for, in essence, the repeat of this opportunity on Saturday afternoon. Any differences, or again, just an opportunity to continue this and for more people to join in? Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. It was really, the idea was more the latter. You know, we wanted to make sure, you know, that everybody had a chance to join. So some people, of course, can do it on a weekday evening, but others may not be able to. So we wanted to make sure that there was also a weekend option for folks. So hopefully we'll get some additional people on that call. But certainly, if you guys want to join that one as well, you're more than welcome to continue this conversation, keep providing input. And again, we're going to see if we can get you know, the technology to cooperate a little better with us by then. But yeah, that was the idea. So appreciate the question. Did I see a hand up from Alex? Was that what I saw there, or was that something else? No? Okay, sorry. Okay, and I just wanted to give anybody, you know, a chance to ask a question if they haven't been able to do that yet before we start to wrap up. Okay, but
hold on, Tyson. It looks like Dr. Minervi has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
And his video. Over.
It came out at the end here that there is a need to integrate a limitation to integrate flood mitigations and environmental restoration. So because here we have now the city and Usace, the manager, please pay attention to the Ala Wai Canal and make the entire Ala Wai Canal the water catchment basing for the flood event with intake to the Ala Wai Canal so the water don't go in Waikiki and Moiliili. And then you use that area not for a golf course with big structures and so on, but for environmental pollution, taking care and so on. That is the project for Usace. The other small project up there, Mauka, they should be done by DLNR, should be done by, in Moiliili, should be done by the city with the drainage and so on. Have a collaborative approach where you three have the different fundings, they do all these things, but the mission, the national mission for for Usace is to spend the money for flood mitigation with environmental integration, and the locality is the entire Ala Wai golf course, not a little portion of it as currently designed, and should be used for pollution mitigation, embracing the idea of the sponge cities, learning from the Chinese. And I say that, but I'm not sure that it reached the top administrator here. This is where we want to see the change in direction from the previous years. The solution, the major solution, and where the money can be spent by the federal government is on an integrated planning of the Ala Wai golf course. That's the major. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate that. Eric, do you have a quick response to Dr. Minervi?
Oh, understood. I agreed, right? So we will seek avenues to where we can implement measures that both reduce flood risk and improve the environment. And I think that gets to the heart of your comment. And to the extent that we can do that, we will within this study. And I understand that, in the future, there might be opportunities to look outside of that as well. So anyway, I'll just leave it there and say, understand your comments, sir, and thank you. Over.
Thanks so much. Okay, I think we've had a good run here. I see the mayor has his hand up. Mr.
Yes.
Mayor or Alex, please
All we
go ahead.
want to do, Tyson, as you close this is once again thank everybody for being on this call tonight. I can feel the passion, the concern. I'm energized by it, even though it's been a 14.5-hour day in this office. I thank you all for your participation, and we go forward. And I also want to thank the Army Corps again for giving us a second chance at this. Mahalo.
Thank you, sir. And for the final word, I'd like to go to Commander Marshall.
Yeah, thank you, my team for putting this together. Really, really well done, and in close partnership with the City and County of Honolulu. We could not have done it without that close partnership. Also, I really appreciate all of the contributors, local residents who are on this call right now. Your comments are all captured. They've impacted me. One person, Ken Kaneshiro, had a comment in the chat that stuck with me. He used the word Pono, and I've come to learn what that word means. It's very deep and meaningful here, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to go for in this Ala Wai project. And I'd admit that maybe we missed the mark a little bit on the last go, and I think that we're working our way to that. So there's been a lot of comments here that have made an impact on me. I'm going to let the team kind of crunch this and provide input back or feedback after this session in an organized way. But I want you to know your comments do absolutely matter, and look forward to. I ask for your patience as we take that feedback and we put it into the study. Okay, that is all from me. Thanks, Tyson, for great moderation.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. And just to reiterate, thank you everyone for your participation. A lot of honest feedback, great ideas, honest concerns. That's all really useful for us. Please stay engaged, and you can do that. Again, we have the workshop coming up on Saturday. If you have feedback about how this went, and any suggestions for the next one or a future one, go ahead and send me an email. It's earl.t.vaughn@usace.army.mil. I'll just post it in here in a minute. You can also keep putting your ideas in Crowdsource Reporter until December 12th. And again, we have the website where we will be continuously putting our updates. That's honolulu.gov/alawai. And you can always send us email at alawai@honolulu.gov, and that will continue to be live whether we're having workshops or not. So thanks, everyone. Mahalo. All right, y'all, it's just us.
Hey, so I don't know what happened in the breakout rooms, but I only had like 8 to 10 people, and it sounded like Elliot ended up with 20.
Yeah, it was weird. I'm going to have to consult with some of my CPCX colleagues on what's going on with this. You know.
I think you're still recording, so I don't know if you want to stop the recording.
Oh, thank you. Yes.